evening. I call the October 15th Planning Board meeting to order, and boy, this month is going fast already. I want to announce to anybody who is here for either the Messer site plan review or the Cumberland Farms site plan review that they have asked for a continuance. And so, is anybody here for those, either of those two? Okay, if so, Tom, what did you do with
They're
them?
over here.
Oh, okay, at the end there, if you want to leave your name and email and which issue you're here for, we can communicate with you, okay? Thank you. Yes, please do it now, and then you don't have to spend the time sitting here, okay?
Unless you really
Thank
want
you.
to.
Yeah, if you want to observe and listen, you could, but,
It is why they put football on Monday night, because they couldn't compete with the planning board on Tuesday.
okay, so first thing on the agenda, as usual, is public comment, and what that is for anybody who, it's not anything to do with the agenda, but anybody who would like to see us bring something up in the future. Okay? Then, Mr. Clerk, the minutes for October 1st.
Madam Chair, I recommend approval of the minutes of October 1st as written.
Second?
Any other comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We have 3 approval not required plans in front of us tonight. And these are ones received between October 2nd and October 10th. The first, the applicant Francis and Victoria Lowell, plan of land to delineate lots on Sipawicet Road and Terhune Design. Terhune Drive, I'm sorry, for the applicant.
Good evening, my name is Jeff Nickerson. I represent the Lowells. I also represent the 300 Committee. The main focus here is Lot 141, which is the subject of the transaction between the 300 Committee and Ms. Lowell. This is land court property, so it's a little bit complex. And mercifully, Tom Bunker from DSS, who drew the plan, is here to answer, technical questions the board might have. What we're trying to do is effectuate this being Ms. Lowell's home, having a lot here. Because of land court standards, Terhune Drive is shown on this plan. And at the request of the land court, we would designate that as a separate lot. If you see in the middle of this plan, there's a detail. This is lot 138. Because the layout of Terhune Drive partially goes onto Ms. Lowell's house lot, so it needs to be depicted by land court standards as a separate lot. So essentially, we'd be submitting a plan to the land court that shows lot 137, 138, which is this little sliver, 139, which is behind Ms. Lowell's house lot, Terhune Drive as lot 140. At this point, Terhune Drive out there is not developed. It just kind of it exists. What happened was, when Terhune Drive was taken, it was actually called Jones Road initially. And the taking was for an easement taking that would allow the selectmen to build out the road if they ever chose to. But it just hasn't been built out this far down. And again, the focus on this for the 300 Committee and Ms. Lowell is really lot 141. Be happy to try to answer any questions the board may have. But essentially, we'd be depicting 5 lots on a land court plan that if the board approves if the board endorses the approval not required, we can then send it up to the engineering division into land court to get them to approve it with finality.
As you can see, this is a lot more complex than we're used to with an A&R. Does anybody have any questions?
Could you point out lot 141 again? I'm not sure I understood the lots.
Yeah, it's, so because the property that the Lowells own is so long and narrow, these are all match lines, essentially. So if you see Terhune Drive here, lot 141 is behind Terhune Drive. It's depicted more in detail at the bottom part of the plan.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any questions? John?
How do we reconcile this with, my understanding is to have an A&R lot that has to be on an acceptable road or way?
So Terhune Drive, as it's shown down here, this is actually Standish Road, which is built out. And so we've got plenty of frontage on Sipawissat for the house lot. Terhune Drive has been taken, and it could be developed at any time. And Standish, as shown, is kind of built out this way. So we believe it would be acceptable as an A&R.
Where that lot, is it 141? I can't,
Yes.
in front of that lot, is Terhune Drive improved, or what is there right now?
Right now, there is not an improved Terhune Drive in that area. It's just a paper layout.
So that's my question, how do we reconcile? That's my understanding of an A&R plan, it has to be on a traveled way or,
If I may, without stepping on council's toes.
Please, Tom. do.
Because we've done quite a bit of research on this lately. So there are three standards under Chapter 81L for what constitutes a way under subdivision. A public way, or a way which the town clerk certifies has been maintained and used as a public way. A way shown on a plan and endorsed under subdivision control. And I think to your point, Mr. Drewley, a way in existence when subdivision control became effective, when having, in the opinion of the planning board, sufficient width, sufficient grades, and adequate construction to provide the needs for vehicular access. So in this case, and I went out there, and it took me a while to find this, because I thought, I'll drive down Terhune Road, although I knew it didn't go through. I'll see how close I get. So after a few turns, we got to that. So Standish Ave is paved where it says Terhune Drive, and it comes down and follows that curve around to the right. It goes past essentially the frontage for Terhune Drive, and then there's a house lot right next to that on Standish. So you actually have a public way, which is the standard, and in this case, it's a public way that's approved. If it was a public way and the frontage was illusory, such as Route 28 is a public way, but you can't get to it because of guardrails on a limited access highway, frontage is illusory, you can't access it from there, therefore it doesn't count. But in this case, it's a public way, and Standish is constructed and brings you out to that area, because I drove down it today all the way down to the end and back, just so I understood. Essentially for your very same question, because I know there are places where the road exists and where the road doesn't exist. So in this case, there's improved pavement in front of that entire strip along there.
including the Terhune Drive portion?
Correct. Yes, and Terhune Drive, interestingly enough, it was laid out as a way by the county. We spent money on it, town meeting in 1961, to start building it, so you can't spend money on a private way, so that reinforced for me that it was a public way. But it is improved as you come down on Standish Ave to probably, I didn't measure it, but it's probably an 18-foot wide travel way. The pavement width, the right-of-way obviously is larger than that.
So in front of lot 141, it's paved?
Correct.
Okay, that was my question before. And my understanding was it was not improved, but from what
I'm confused
the
too.
applicant said. I mean, I don't have a problem
What
with
you
this,
say is
but-
labeled here as Terhune Drive. Isn't Terhune Drive at Standish if we go drive it?
The sign out there says Standish.
I think we need a site visit to understand this. I don't think I could vote for this. I have no idea what we're talking about, whether it's Terhune Drive or Standard. I don't know.
Standish.
Standish.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to it, I just don't want to set a precedence here.
Is that Terhune Drive there? Does it have trees growing in it?
Excuse me, Vicky Lowell.
I was still talking, wasn't I?
Yeah, okay.
She's going to answer your question, though, I
Well,
think.
I was having a conversation this way.
I'm sorry.
I was just trying to see, are we talking about, I'm looking this in the way we looked at Timothy Bourne Cartway. Is this road that we're showing here, can you drive it now? Can we drive, we need to see this road. I think we need to go out there.
As of
Point.
as of
I
15
don't feel
minutes ago, or as in half an hour ago, yes, you could, because I went out there specifically for this case. I drove up Sipawissat Road, I got to essentially that intersection with the plan in hand, and took a left, or took a right, and drove down what's labeled as Terhune Drive on the
Okay,
plan.
you're coming in from the other way. I'm coming in Terhune and see where it ends, and it ends.
No,
You're
no.
saying this is really
Off of Sipawissa.
Up off of Sipawissa coming in the other way, and you're calling that Terhune,
So
okay.
Sipawissa and Standish Ave are at the corner of Sipawissa and Terhune Drive on this plan, which is the lot 137 on the plan.
Go ahead.
Would it be helpful to give you a little history? Or do you, I know you have a legal standard, but we bought this land, our house and the 10 acres behind it in 1973. And all those years, I've gotten two separate tax bills, one on, I don't know the lot numbers, but one on the 3-acre parcel and one on the 6-acre parcel. And then I went to decide the 6-acre parcel is all adjacent to BB Woods. And being a conservationist, I decided I would like to give that land to the 300 committee. So I said, oh, here, I want to give you this 6 acres. And then I found out it wasn't in a separate lot because the town took the easement, but they never recorded it in land court. So since October, I've been trying to get this lot separated so I can give it to the 300 committee. And so this is why it's before you. And there's no intention to develop anything. It's just, I have to legally get the 6 acres separated, and I wanted to keep the 3 acres with the house because the house backs up close to that 3 acres, and I want at some point someone will decide how to use that 3 acres with the house. That's the story. And Standish Avenue is it's a loop. And Terhune Drive comes into it. And so part of the taking when they took it in 1960 was they made it wider. So the old Standish got widened, and so that's why there's that little sliver of a lot along our side of Standish, and they also took land on the other side. It's a 60-foot layout, I think, there, and it's 80 feet until you get to Standish. And the land court sent it back saying, well, maybe we could just have 2 lots with an easement on each, or maybe we should have a separate lot, and the town's feedback was they'd like it to be a separate lot, so that's the lot that will be Terhune Drive.
Thank you.
So could I ask Ms. Law a question?
Please, Vicki, do you mind standing up there?
Well, just one more time, I just want to clarify. I know where your house is.
Yeah.
As you face your house to the right of it, that parcel, 141, is that part of Terhune Drive paved or not? Next to your house?
Yes, next to my house, it's all paved.
I'm
Oh,
gonna step up there, because I don't have a plan. in front of me.
Next to your house is a little
This
paved.
area right here, is that?
No, that is
paved?
not paved.
That's not paved, so what is there currently?
Just land, wooded land.
This is the parcel, this is one of the parcels you're trying to,
I'm trying to give that, plus
I understand.
another lot that's part of the Sipawissa Highlands subdivision, but that's no problem, that's fully recorded, and that doesn't have, Mr. LeBlanc, who developed that, never extended the road. It's an orphan lot for that lot,
Okay.
So, and actually, I'm gonna be giving 7 acres to the 300 committee, if I can ever get it extricated from land court.
Understandable. Well, thank you very much.
Jim?
This is what I was getting at. When we took a look at Timothy Bourne Cartway, and it had trees growing up in it, we said it's not adequate for an A&R. And now if we do this, that means every other paper road, we're changing a policy based on Timothy Bourne Cartway. That was an unpaved road with trees growing into it, and we determined it was not an adequate way for an A&R. And now this one, we're saying it is, if we do. I think that's
But this isn't going to be a subdivision, right?
Well-
Because the 300.
an A&R. It is a subdivision, approval not required subdivision. It just means
I
it
think
meets our
Tom wants
standards.
to clarify
Yeah,
more.
so not having been here during the Timothy Bourne Cartway, is that a private way or a public way? Because it sounds, and that's the difference. Under the law, it states that a public way. Now, and this is why I drove out there today, to make sure there was actually pavement on that section of Terhune
I just heard it had trees in it. I'm really confused.
All right, may I?
I don't understand.
Since I live there, I can. So when I drove out there today, I drove down this way, past the house, and this was all paved, and it's paved down to here. So you've got this pavement here, and you need 100-foot of frontage for a lot on Terhune. So even though it's a drive, and even though it's been given to somebody else, somebody has a right to build in it, it's got the frontage that you need under A&R law. It says you've got frontage on a way.
Paved way?
On a way paved or approved by the planning board, a private way, of sufficient grade construction, things like that. But in this case, it's both a public way and it's both paved here. When you get back to here, you get into the bamboo, Japanese bamboo jungle.
Japanese knotweed.
Yeah, it's whatever it is. There's, fortunately dying right now. Seasonally, I'm sure. But essentially, you got the frontage for here and here as the road curves around there. The one thing technically you might say is that lot 138 is actually got the frontage that's required on that, but you couldn't build on that because it's only 13 feet wide or so there. But, because I knew this was coming up, and it's very confusing out there, as we know, because parts of Terhune have been built and parts haven't.
Just one thing, Land Court apparently said this is a very unique situation. So I'm stuck with it. But as I say, I've gotten a separate tax bill on that 6 acres since 1973, because the town, so I always thought it was a separate lot.
Looks like Tom also has something he wishes to say.
For the record, my name is Tom Bunker. I prepared this plan. Lucky me. It is unique. As I was doing it, I felt actually we're preparing a plan of what already exists. I feel that I could have done this as an 81X plan. The town, as Vicki said, it has a separate assessor's number. This lot 141 is already assessed separately. Town, on the records, consider it a separate lot. It has its own assessor's number already. Terhune Drive it is a public way. It's not developed, actually we say on the plan here, undeveloped. But by the county putting that road through, it basically created that lot, and the plan this plan before you that I prepared really, in my opinion, just shows existing conditions which are on the ground now. I mean, existing property lines, not existing as far as what's built or not built. Obviously, to clarify it, 141 could be labeled not a building lot. I don't know how that would affect the appraisal as it goes through as part of the donation and tax implications as far as charitable donations for Mrs. Lowell. But this has existed since, well, for more than 50 years. As it's shown here.
Charlotte?
I appreciate the concern with precedent, but a unique situation doesn't really set a precedent. And we have an opportunity for every A&R to listen to the circumstance and make decisions accordingly.
I agree. I think we need a site visit. I can't really make it clear that that's a street that's usable.
I guess I'm content with Tom's site visit.
Okay.
It's not through here. It's not built through this section. There's a.
That's actually, I heard testimony that's wooded. We're given an A&R on a road that has trees growing in it.
We're giving an A&R on a unique situation that has the frontage to be a lot on a public way.
But it's an A&R
Trees growing in it.
for a lot on a public way.
No,
They'd not be able to get a
because-
building permit for this lot because it doesn't have the requisite physical access. But it is I think it's an existing lot. The town has it assessed as a separate lot on a public way, which was taken in 1960 or so, is that right?
John?
As I said, I'm not opposed to what's being proposed here, but I would just like to have maybe 1 week so that I could do a little research on this. Are we meeting next week?
We are.
I don't know if that's how we do something of this nature, but we had 30 days, I think, to approve it or deny it. And I just want to clarify myself, that we're not doing something here for a good cause that turns around and becomes a legal situation in the future.
How would you research that, John?
I have a lot of documentation about A&Rs and how to approve them and how not to approve them. I just want to take a look at the paperwork. I thought this was going to be pretty simple tonight. I would have already done that.
Right, I guess if we have that kind of a question, would we refer it to the town council? And if it's a research paper, no?
No, I think it's fairly well,
Yeah.
fairly well straight up. The board shall forthwith sign an A&R plan if the lot has frontage on one of those three ways that I had mentioned before. A public way.
Well, then let's try this out. I move that we approve this based on what Tom just said. Is there a second?
Second.
And I think, further to that, I think we can say approval, but we always put in without regard to buildability. But I also think it should be expanded that the land court has said this is a unique situation, so that hopefully that would prevent somebody saying, but you did it.
Well, and I want to point out that the situation is unique, but the characteristics in front of the property are legitimate for endorsement.
Right, we're not
So-
doing something,
You can be unique and wrong, and you can be unique and right, I shouldn't say that, but you can be unique with outside the parameters of an endorsement, and you can be unique with inside the parameters of endorsement. And in this case, from what I've seen, and to Mr. Bunker's point, Lot 141, which I believe already exists on the assessor's way, is, you could put a note on that that says not a buildable lot, because it's not a buildable lot now, but it's not something they're actually asking to sort of retool the lots. Those new lots that are created are this sliver of one, and correct me if I'm wrong, or is this sliver of 138 where the Terhune right-of-way is laid out by the county in the 1960s comes across the property. That appears to be the only new parcel carved out of this area from looking at what we've got on the assessor's maps and what's on the ground.
so as I boil that down, we don't have to condition it on anything. Just, we're gonna approve it.
It meets the parameters for the board's endorsement. But as John's point, the board has 21 days, and if the board wishes to, they can certainly take their time, take a look at it, and come back here in a week and have a vote. You won't be outside of the realm of constructive approval, because it was filed, last week, I think.
Well, according to this, we'd have to decide by the 22nd, which is next Tuesday's meeting.
We've got a motion on the floor that's been
I know we
seconded.
do, yeah. So, it's been moved and seconded. Unless there is further discussion,
What's the motion?
that we
approve.
move to endorse it with our usual, without regard to buildability, et cetera. I still don't have in front of me the et cetera, but the typical notation on a plan such as this. Are you okay with that?
Fine.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
So,
Opposed?
okay. 2 opposed, 4 in favor.
That's 401. Are we missing a person?
Yeah.
Bob
Bob's
isn't
not
here.
All right, I'm sorry.
Okay? Okay.
Thank you.
402.
Thank you.
I've been at this for a year, so I'm.
Yeah.
And I think the town created a problem for me, and I'm glad you've helped me solve it. Thank you.
Okay, the next applicant under an approval not required is JDH Realty Trust, plan of land to combine 2 lots into one, located on Collins Road, map number 30050080002, and Escapin Islands.
Yep.
Anybody here to speak for this? Okay. Has everybody had a chance to see it? Are there any questions that since no one's here representing that Tom might be able to answer.
Here's the second lot.
It's a little one there.
Oh, thank you.
little one.
Yeah.
That gives them right away.
Oh,
The road. Otherwise, they don't have right away.
so this makes it buildable.
I do not know that we have that particular A and R on the screen here.
But I think everybody has said they've seen it, and we do have
We
it
have it right here.
right here. That, this one. Oops. It's a little corner.
Gives them frontage.
And the only thing, if I may, the only thing particularly interesting about this was that the surveyed plan doesn't line up with our GIS, which is not to say that that surveyed plan is inaccurate, just the assessor's records are the assessor's records for the purposes of assessing value. So the lot lines are a little different on the front. They show a bit different proportions on the GIS, but that'll be fixed as soon as that plan's recorded and the new plans come into the assessors, add to the GIS.
Any questions on this? Good, John.
So on this plan, it appears that Patrick, Matthew, Patrick, Louise, Collins have the land next door. It doesn't show a lot number on it. It looks like they're taking part of their land and going to add it to Lot 1. Is that correct?
Yes, that triangle that you see there is actually shown different on the GIS plan.
Okay. So my other question would be, if this gets approved, does this make the other lot non-conforming for frontage?
Well, the other.
Because we don't, it isn't really shown on this plan.
Yeah, the existing lot, and I'll bring it up on the GIS, that'll probably be helpful in this case, because it is. So much for searching it by the owner's name. Huh? All right, so we're on Collins Road?
Yes. Tom? Tom?
Yes, sir.
Looking at the locus up in the corner, I can see that it does not make it non-conforming.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't see the locus up here.
So I said the difference in our plan and their plan is that the GIS plan sort of implies that it's just a little different lot configuration down here on the street. You see that diagonal that comes through, sort of
Sure.
bleeds into lot number 2.
The lot next door that I had a question about has frontage on 2 roads, so I know that it won't make it non-conforming. So, no, I have no objection.
Okay, it also looks like it has plenty of frontage as well.
I have no objection.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone else? And could I have a motion again
Move to accept the A&R.
to endorse
Second.
without, move to endorse this A and R without regard to
Without regard to buildability. Sorry.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The third A and R, Chappaquoit Associates, perimeter plan for a parcel of land located on Associates Road, map number 2405010022E, Holmes and McGrath. Is there anyone here to speak to this A and R? Please state your name when you get up here.
I don't see the sun here, but I have a,
You bring your stick?
I did.
Okay, I thought we,
Perimeter.
I think
plan.
it's
Is that a special
anything
kind of
after
plan?
what I just saw.
no, they did.
Because they're following this
Especially if
Oh.
we map that, we could make it look-
weird.
They're tracing a natural contour or
Well,
something?
this was an old,
Pick it up tomorrow.
Oh,
okay, that was,
it does.
but it is the bound.
PTSD, but-
Or, excuse me, it was a stream.
Good evening, folks. My name is Patrick Roach. I work for Holmes and McGrath, and we're representing the applicants, Chappaquoit Associates. Locus is, the property is located in the northeast part of Chappaquoit Island, commonly known as Little Beach. And the purpose of this plan is, really, it's a perimeter plan. The original subdivision plan for Chappaquoit Island that showed this beach area was prepared in 1904. And so there's not a lot of information with regards to this lot at the Registry of Deeds. So in 1904, mean high water ran across the lot through here and curled around. So now, over the several decades, due to accretion, this lot area has increased quite a bit. So the applicants really want to have a plan that they can record at the Registry of Deeds. Now, it's not a true A&R because we're not subdividing. The lines of the abutters on the west are based on monumentation, and the easterly end is defined by the center line of a stream as it was shown on that 1904 plan. That area right through there. So I've colored the plan just in the area of their property. And it's not an 81X in the sense that you had two deeded parcels and they're being merged to be one lot. It's just the beach area has increased, again, due to accretion. So, so the purpose of the plan, again, is just to show a total area for what exists on the ground today in comparison to what existed in 1904.
So nature made them a lot.
That
Is
is,
that it? And they want to record it.
that's correct. So, my, the applicant is seeking your endorsement of this A&R plan.
And they currently own, from what you have marked as the former high watermark, the road, and beyond, they own across the road?
Well, the lot is defined by the sideline of the road right through here, so it has plenty of frontage, and then it's defined again down here by what was the stream in 1904, and there is a recorded plan for this lot here. It was formerly known as lots 6 and 7, and then an A&R plan was prepared and merged the lots and now it's known as Lot 6A. And they were defined as lots 6 and 7 on the 1904 plan, I believe, but this plan was down here. It was recorded in 1987, and it's recorded in book 443, page 7. And then this is the abutter on the west side.
John?
Just a question for you, please. It says, I'm reading your court cases here, for perimeter plans. This gets endorsed. You have 3-year zoning protection. What happens after that? I know you're not really caring about zoning protection, but I'm just curious.
I'm not prepared to answer that question. The lot itself is dunes, and it's located in a velocity zone, so
Okay.
I don't know what they could do with it.
And I think typically we don't take any testimony for A&R plans, do we? I know we've had
We've
2
had
unique
people.
cases tonight, but
We've had people, but this is again sort of a weird one.
yes.
So, Tom?
If I may, actually aren't Patrick's court cases, those are mine. Because when we got in a perimeter plan, so I've been at this for a while, and I'm like, I've never gotten a perimeter plan, 25 years or so. So I went back to look up what's up with a perimeter plan. And to your point, for the most part, nobody cares about our perimeter plan. You can just go ahead and file it with the registry. The only benefit to it is it affords you protection from any zoning changes for 3 years. You file a subdivision plan, you've got a zoning freeze for 8 years. You file an A&R plan, you got a zoning freeze for 3 years. So any zoning that gets changed on the road, they're grandfathered for the next 3 years by filing this plan.
So they could have done an 81X, but they do the perimeter plan because it gives them some zoning protection.
I don't know why, other than the fact that it's usually with the perimeter plan, you're identifying what the perimeters, and it's pretty easy to sort out. But in this case, that boundary on the right was the center line of a stream that doesn't exist anymore. So in this case, we're sort of using this plan to reestablish that property line and following that length of the stream that's shown on the plan.
Okay.
Yeah,
Right, thank you.
unfortunately, we don't have a meets and bounds description for it, so that has been the historic
Sure.
delineation between the two parcels.
Thank you very much.
I was hoping for a 4th A&R tonight, so one would just be sort of like, oh yeah, that was easy. But this is, the easy ones have been done, and now we have these, fairly unusual ones we're seeing.
I don't know about the rest of the board, but Pam and I were ready for an easy one. Now we're a little disappointed.
I'm just
I'm sorry, I
wondering,
did my
because
best.
it's so convoluted, we have a drawing here. How anybody in the future, if that kind of meanders with sand drift, and how are you gonna know where the bounds are that we'd say, okay, tonight? That's,
Because we're gonna define those bounds. Instead of being bound by the stream, it's gonna be the line on this plan.
Right.
Say this is it, right?
The
That's what we're
surveyor will
doing.
find it.
Okay,
We're saying no more center of the stream, here's the line.
Tom,
So, in the past, where we had sort of a wavy lot line, I had suggested that we have bounds put in. A local attorney told me, well, that's not required under your subdivision regulations. So we'll be fixing that. And we will have that requirement for a bound at those turns and corners because, you know, the people who may know what they've got now, they probably don't know what that is out there because it's curvy and out, probably, you know, chock full of all kinds of things that make it difficult to walk through there. But putting bounds in at those corners makes things better for posterity. But it's not in our regulations right now, but we are amending our subdivision regulations, and we get to those sections about A&R plans and things like that, we'll consider the merits of including that as a bounds needed at where lots twist and turn, on the recommendation of a local attorney.
Is
Okay.
this piece of land threatened with a zoning change?
No, the only reason, like I said, the only reason this piece of paper is in there is because I got a perimeter plan, and Mike goes, it's a perimeter plan, and I had to go back to school and read up what a perimeter plan was. So this is from the handbook, the A&R handbook that the state has put out. And so they talk about what an A&R perimeter plan is, and essentially in the footnote it says, you know, perimeter plans, people file them at the registry without coming to the board. The only reason they might come to the board to get it filed and signed is to invoke that 3-year protection. And I'm gonna guess that out here, I don't know if we got any zoning changes proposed for out there, but these people will certainly be insulated from any for the next 3 years due to just the nature of the board's endorsement, because that's what A&R plans do.
so may I have a motion if everybody's satisfied for endorsement of this plan? Again, the standard language, no regard to,
I move we endorse it with no regard to buildability.
is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion on this? Or, I think it sounded like everybody was satisfied. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstain. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, that's probably something new.
The next two, as had been announced, they both requested a continuance. And, let's see, the Messers had been opened already, Cumberland Farms had not been opened. So, you have a letter in your file from Kevin Clower. He's requesting a continuance on this matter, and there is no date here. Tom, do we have a date that he's requesting it for?
The continuance date?
Yes.
I'll take a look at an email in the interim and see if we can sort that out.
Okay. Because we'd have to have a motion to accept the request for the applicant's continuance.
If you could let me know what dates the board says open in the coming weeks, it'd be greatly appreciated. Says Kevin Clower regarding Goleta Drive. So are we on Goleta at this point, or are we on Cumberland?
Well, it says here they want to continue it from tonight till the 22nd.
Wait, which one is that, the Messers? No, that's the next one.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so I'm, Sherry is helping me out here. So the email regarding the Messers is to a date the board has open in the coming weeks, plural. So weeks to me says that's a November date.
I don't know what you're looking at for the 22nd, and then we have a meeting on the 5th of November.
Yes, 5th and the 25th, well, we haven't officially called the 5th a meeting date yet,
Oh, okay.
but because our regular meeting date is the 12th, which is town meeting, and we're not meeting next week, I assumed that we'd want to have that discussion about making the 5th an official meeting date, so we don't run into having a month between meetings.
So we're meeting next Tuesday, the 22nd,
Correct.
okay? And we don't know about the 5th yet.
My recommendation would be, let's have a meeting on the 5th, because we're likely not going to have one on the 12th.
So we need a motion to accept their request for a continuance. to the 5th of November.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then we have Cumberland Farms, and we never did open the site plan review for them. This is new to us, but it was put on here. So they're asking for a continuance to next week's meeting. Everybody okay with that? We need the same motion to continue.
Move we continue to October 22nd.
Second, is it? Somebody second it?
22nd? Oh,
Second.
All in favor?
aye.
Thank you.
Pat,
Yes.
I'm going to be recusing myself from that hearing, so I did not vote tonight.
Okay, I'm not going to be here. So we need a simple majority on that, on site plan review. But I won't be here for that meeting, so. Okay, we're going on to creation of design standards in conjunction with the Falmouth zoning bylaw. And I think you all know that we had in front of us conceptual design, or contextual design on Cape Cod. And I think everybody thought it was a pretty good document as it is. And we will be making changes as we go along to make it more a Falmouth document. But if no one has any objections, just to continue to move this along, what do you feel about adopting it as our guideline?
I'm in favor of adopting it as long as we know that we are definitely changing it so that it has Falmouth examples predominantly.
And we had talked
Preserve
about
our
getting
local character.
solar in here, parking in
Right.
here. What was the third one, Tom?
Well, it was solar and parking.
Yeah.
Were the two other things we wanted to add. And I
Okay.
have to tell you that frankly, there isn't a lot out there in the universe as to design for solar. The most effective strategies we've seen for solar is shrouding it in ornamental shrubs and landscaping and things like that. So obviously, if you plant something that's an ornamental tree, it's going to grow to 15, 20 feet, whatever, and it's going to bloom out, but not grow taller than the arrays. So landscaping and things like that, sort of making sure, but there's nothing really that does a great job at sort of spelling out the design standards for solar as much as we looked and asked and done some research on them. It's largely buffering it with landscaping, which is.
Wouldn't there be placement on the site issues?
Pardon?
Placement on the site.
Well, when we look at solar new, we obviously want solar somewhere, and not in the front yard, but where we've got solar in the front yard. And I think the perfect example for most people has been, what if they put solar at Stop and Shop? In that case, the requirement would be make sure that their solar doesn't take out the required number of parking spaces. Usually when you're putting those canopies up, you're putting them in such situations, so there's additional steel and concrete in the parking lot. So you've got to maintain your parking count. So if you want to come out and put solar over all of Stop and Shop and you need 150 spaces, if you've got 150 spaces at the end, you're fine. If you have 100 spaces at the end, then you can't put that much solar out because you don't comport with your zoning regulations anymore. So frankly, those are the limiting factors we've got for solar is how do we shield it, and how do we make sure that if someone comes in to add it as an accessory use, that it comports with that. But keep in mind, because of the building commissioner's determination that solar panels aren't structures, they don't come to us with a site plan. They go directly to the building commissioner, who determines how they're going to be built. And his requirements have been that if you use a megawatt of solar on your property, then you can put a megawatt of solar on the property, but you can't generate more electricity than you use on the site as an accessory use. So while we have site plan for a building, where we have site plan for subdivisions and things like that. If someone wants to come in and retrofit solar, because the building commissioners determined it's not a structure, he gets to make that call. I'm sure he'd like to revisit that decision.
I didn't know he'd done that.
I disagree with the determination. I tried to do some estimates of what we're calling not a structure, and it's a 4-foot concrete mass going 4 feet down to the ground, raising up 5 feet. It probably weighs about 2 tons, and then there's a few tons of steel coming out, and he's determined that these aren't structures, and therefore, we don't have to do site plan review and people can put them anywhere they want. I've been against that for a long time, but this is just a continuation of it. I think on design review is something different. We may not have site plan review, but when design review comes in, we may say, well, wouldn't it be better if you put some of those over there and some of those there? So I think, hopefully, we're talking about guidelines here, right? And so we would actually be saying, well, maybe you should move them around a little bit. Or take into consideration, why couldn't they go on the back side of the building? Why do they have to be right in the front? So it's a complicated mess. And as long as the building commissioner is saying that they're not structures, no matter how much they weigh or how high they are, I'm dumbfounded at how to go forward on it, but this probably is better.
Well, it is, because it's design guidelines.
Guidelines.
And when you look at it as guidelines, it does give us a little bit more clout once we adopt something like this. Now, to Charlotte's point, the pictures in here are from all over the Cape. She would like to see it more representative of Falmouth and what we want things to look like in Falmouth, and I agree with her. I think that the alternative energy can and should be expanded to look at siting of, I'll call them solar trees. But we also are having to look at alternative energy sources for fueling of cars. And so I think that needs to be expanded in here too. And what about where they are and design guidelines for that too? Where should they optimally be placed? So we have the energy part of it, and I'm really not, I haven't spent any time on the parking part of it, but as you know, we kind of like to be able to have more flexibility for parking decisions, and until we get it in a design guideline, but it's, I think, better to have this in place now, adopted now, and we can have a small subcommittee, 2 or 3 people, work on changing the wording if you prefer to do it, so that it doesn't just sit and languish. But that's up to the board if you would like to do that.
That sounds good to me.
A small subcommittee? Are you volunteering, John?
No.
I didn't think so.
Sounds good to me.
Are you volunteering?
Yes,
Okay. We would need another volunteer,
at
though.
least one more,
Yeah, at least one more. Is anybody,
because it will be the
You'll
language
do-
for the
okay, Pam will
alternative
do it.
energy. Hmm?
Pam said she'll do it,
Good.
okay?
Okay.
So you two, yeah,
And we'll bring
you
it
will
back to
too,
the
Paul?
board.
No, I'm.
Oh.
I was gonna make- You have the 2 volunteers you want.
Yes.
I was just gonna make a comment. I think the subcommittee, particularly with the local comprehensive plan, although that was much larger, was very effective.
Yeah.
By having a small group do that and come back to the board. So I certainly would encourage that. Excuse me.
Well, one of the reasons that I don't think we need the kind of committee that we had going with the LCP is that we got the base of it. It's going to be modifying it.
Right.
But it was very effective.
Absolutely it was, yes. Thank you, Paul, for that comment. So, will somebody make a motion then that we adopt contextual design on Cape Cod, design guidelines for large-scale development as our design guideline? Somebody make a motion to that? Is there a second, please?
Second.
Okay.
And did I hear in your motion supplemented with topical pictures of
Yeah,
Falmouth replacing?
of Falmouth,
Okay.
insofar as possible. Like, if we wanted to head for something in design, like something in the Mashpee Commons, fine, that's sort of a unique kind of thing. So we could look for unique elsewhere, but as much as possible, see what we like about Falmouth and what we want to encourage.
Well, we're arguing that our purpose is to preserve local character. Our examples ought to be predominantly local.
Correct.
Well, and my argument fell, apparently not very well addressed when I suggested, well, we have Cape Cod berm, and we have a Cape Cod house. So do the other 14 towns in Falmouth or in Cape Cod who'll say, no, isn't Cape Cod Cape Cod?
There are similarities, but we have our own unique features.
So it has been moved and seconded.
At least we think so.
Unless there is further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain. Thank you. Changes to the Falmouth subdivision regulations. And as you know, we've talked about this, we've had, well, I thought I brought it with me. I guess I didn't.
It's here. I brought mine.
Okay. So we have the subdivision regulations, and we want to include 53G in our regulations. And that,
If I may.
please. Yeah, I thought I had picked this up, but I guess not.
Planning board policies and procedures, is that still wrong?
No, it's the
Subdivision?
subdivision regs. This is what you stuck in our folder.
Yes, ma'am, just making sure that you were paying attention to what I'm supposed to be paying attention to.
There you go.
So in addition to the information that's in your packet, we did a little work to ask about how other folks have looked at 53G in their various areas. So the planners listserv has 893 some odd planners on the listserv. So we sent a notice to the planners listserv and said, three questions. Do you use 53G? If you do, how much do you charge? And do you have an engineering department in your town? So not all 893 people respond. So we did get about 20, 23 sort of responses. And we also reached out to our colleagues on the Cape to see how they went about this sort of issue. So where we last left off, we were discussing the fee schedule, and I think the board was pretty much comfortable enough where we're going until we got to this part about this retainer for the applicant who comes in. So presently, road inspections are $1 a lineal foot. Re-inspections are $1 per event. For subdivisions, in our case, we suggested that we bring in a consulting engineer to review projects under 4453G, and that initial retainer be $4,000 to cover the cost of that review. The dollars and cents are put into a separate account. That separate account garners interest, not much interest because we're not an investment house. And so any unused funds would be returned to the applicant. So what you see here in the spreadsheet is various towns and what they replied back and where they use 53G and what the retainer fees are. And as you can see, the retainer fees are all over the place. Duxbury does $5,000, Sudbury does $2,000, Milton does $10,000 to $15,000. I'm glad I don't have to tell someone that in Milton. Pembroke, $6,000, $4,000, and whether they had an engineering division. We did this to point out that, we're sort of the outlier in doing this, and we've had an evolution here in town from the days when people used to come into the engineering division and bring their plans and have the engineering division actually do their stormwater calculations for them. We've moved on from that, and now we're moving on furthermore and allowing the engineering division to do more work on their other projects in addition to reviewing things for the town. In the process, the review process would continue the same. We get an application and the referrals go out to all those various departments. The engineering division would be included, and they would identify those areas of concern on the plan on the initial review that says, I'm concerned about these 3 or 4 things, whatever they happen to be. And turn that over to the consulting engineer to drill down in whether that is an issue with stormwaters, with trip generation, with internal circulation, and things to that effect. So that is sort of where we left off at, with the board expressing some hesitancy about the use of 53G consultants and the fee for such.
So Tom, are you anticipating, we have Appendix D here in our current one, and it says project review fees. Are you anticipating that the blue project review fees will simply supplant
That's correct.
what's in here? What about the other fees that are up here, that are not indicated
Yeah,
in here?
those are fees for applications. So someone files an A&R plan, it's a $100 fee. So the only thing that's been pulled out of here are the actual 2 lines that deal with inspections. Because in this part of our design review, we've been looking at the inspection protocol. We've taken the inspections from those initial 4 to the 11. There was some discussion about that last time. Mr. Drewley asked, well, do all those inspections happen at the same time? Can some be batched together? And some things come, part and parcel together. So do those inspections together. So we increased the inspection protocol, changed the fees, and requested the use of 53G consultants, much like the rest of the Commonwealth.
And then are you anticipating, because I think that this was to be included too, this inspection checklist?
Yes, and so the inspection checklist, and this is where we get back to the discussion about what does it cost to complete a road? When we were recently looking at Cape Estates, we had a few different estimates for things. We had some numbers that came in fairly low when we looked at them through the lens of what it would cost the town to do those on a prevailing wage basis. The numbers were considerably different, because when the developer's building things, they're just going with the lowest bidder, they're going with their employees, they don't have to pay a prevailing wage. If for some reason the subdivision was to fail and fall to the hands of the town, sometimes the bonding agency will hire someone to complete the road work. Typically, they're just going to sit on the check until someone asks for it, and if they give it up, they're going to give it up to us, and we're going to have to hire people based on these prevailing wages. Mike McGrath, who is currently in London, he tells me, and hopefully he's looking both ways, because he told me every time, look both ways when you cross the street, they drive differently over there. I think he's going to get back. I hope he paid attention to me. But Mike had some concerns about the dollar numbers that are in that Mass DOT spreadsheet. And those are dollar numbers that they compile on an annual basis and they review. So on an annual basis, we'll be looking at that structure as well, and holding a hearing and having a vote to adjust those as well. As you recall from Cape Estates, we had an estimate that the engineering division produced that was, the number was in the realm of $400,000. The applicants asked for a lesser fee and for lesser lots, and the board decided to opt for a different number for what engineering came up with. So it's always the board's purview to decide what that bond amount is. What we want to make sure is that we have a readily quantifiable number to bring to the table for that. And that's the nature of that MassDOT spreadsheet. If those MassDOT numbers add up to $400,000, the board can say, yeah, the bond's $400,000, or we'll take some portion of that. But we've got a justifiable, rational number that we can refer to, and not just sort of pulling numbers out of a hat.
So this, when I guess I'd like to know where this would fit in.
That is an appendix in the back of the
It
book.
is an appendix, okay. And then we've got Article 7, construction requirements. And that looks to be added on, looking at the index, that it would be entirely separate, because Article 6 is performance requirements. And then Article 7, we'd add on construction requirements.
So here's Article 7. These are the current construction requirements. So we have, we're requiring a pre-construction meeting, which is fairly standard in most towns. And then we looked at the inspection protocol. Right now, we do inspections 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So in this case, the numbers you see in red that are highlighted out, those go away. And the new inspections are inspection 1, preliminary subgrade, inspection 2. So that text in the blue is your new inspection protocol. Inspection 1, preliminary road subgrade. Inspection 2, drainage and catch basins. Inspection 3, installation of water services as certified by the Falmouth Water Department. Inspection 4, final subgrade. Inspection 5, gravel base plane. Inspection 6, grade and catch basin inlets. Inspection 7, installation of curbing. Inspection 8, final surfaces. Inspection 9, installation of sidewalks and shoulders. Inspection 10, street signs. Inspection 11, final cleanup. And so that replaces your inspection protocol, those new 11 lines.
When I'm looking at this, there's nothing in here under any article that says inspections. So that's why I'm saying is Article 7 brand new.
Yeah, no, Article 7 is not brand new. Article 7 is your construction requirements. It's Section 30542 in the subdivision bylaws.
Okay. I'm not finding, yeah, please.
Is this the new checklist?
Mm-hmm.
You're correct. Look, you have stuff. Article 6 doesn't it?
Yeah,
Apparently, we left pages.
that's why I'm scratching my head on this.
Right.
And it's not reflected in the index. So, yeah, it isn't part of it right now, the current, if this is our current one.
No, so if I may. So in your current subdivision regulations, Section 30524 is essentially those areas that I'd lined out previously. So it starts with A, to be the responsibility of the applicant to notify, and then the 5 inspections. I'm just going to toggle back over here, and here you see Section A lined out, replaced with the new Section A that requires the pre-construction meeting. And then your inspections 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm just going to toggle back to our original document. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in section 305.42 go away and are replaced by 1 through 11. Like I said, we're not pressed for time on something like this, so if there's, when in doubt, tell the planner, can you come back and give us a better story next time, and I'd be happy to do that.
I would find it a lot more understandable if I had it all put together so I could see it instead of,
So it
Okay.
flows better.
I just have a question.
Wait.
It looks like we're going from 5 inspections to 11. What's
Yes.
the financial impact of that?
I do not know. Presently, the financial impact of doing the inspection protocol the way we do it requires people to actually tear things out they put in and then put them back in. Because of how this list is put together, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we actually have them put down a base and then rip it back up and put gas lines in and put the base back down. So I'm not quite sure where this protocol came from, but our engineering division is telling us that, you know, we're making people put stuff in and then making them take it back out so we can see that it's okay. So this inspection protocol, it's going to follow the way people build roads, and it's probably going to save the applicant, because the applicant's going to build it this way.
My question was, okay, they have 5 how much do they have to pay for those 5 inspections, and how much do they have to pay for the new 11 inspections we're substituting in place? That is the question.
Presently, they have to pay $100 per lineal, $100 for an inspection, and they have to pay $1 a lineal foot initially. So $1 a lineal foot. So if you got a 2,000-foot long road, you're spending $2,000. And then we come out and do an inspection. You're going to do 4 inspections, so there's $100 an inspection. There's $2,400 if you've got a 2,000-foot long road. Not everybody has a 2,000-foot long road. But in this case, it's $4,000, and that's the initial retainer. I have done this for a long time. I have typically not gotten over one reimbursement of the fund. In Kingston, we required $2,500. So we would have someone apply, give us a check for $2,500. The consulting engineer put together the proposal and says, it's going to cost me $3,100 to do this plan. So I have to go back to the applicant and say, I need another $600 to cover the cost of the review. That's why we put in a number that's sufficient to cover the cost of the review, because once again, time is money. Money is money also. But I don't want to hold people up by saying, oh, we're going to have to send this out and get an estimate to figure what it's going to cost. We'll get back to you in a week or two with what it's going to cost. We're going to let you know, you're going to give us $4,000 up front. We're going to start the prospects of, or starting the inspection and the review. And if we get to a point we have to replenish the account, we'll ask for money, and that typically when it gets down to around $1,000. I have probably had a review that exceeded $4,000 in Kingston for a particularly complex country club subdivision. But for the most part, site plans and subdivisions usually reviewed for well within that range.
Who does the inspections?
Currently, our Falmouth Engineering Division does those inspections. So they say, we like an inspection, they send that note to me. They send it to engineering at the same time. Engineering and I confer, are they ready for the inspection? Have they done the other things they've got to do with that? And then Falmouth Engineering Division goes out and does that inspection. In this case, it would be the consulting engineers doing that inspection. So there would be a portal-to-portal cost. That's what they cost when they leave the office to come here. So there is that additional expense that's in that, but typically that's for subdivisions. When we're doing, we're doing 53G in the context of subdivisions at this point, but we'll also be doing it for site plans review as well when we get to the planning board's policies next round. But, yeah, the inspection's going to be borne by the applicant, and he's going to pay the inspector for his time to come out and do those inspections, to do the reviews in-house and do the inspections in-house. Usually when we see these proposals, we also get something from them that says, and this proposal covers the cost of attending a planning board meeting or two, sometimes usually it's a meeting. We typically don't bring consulting engineers into a planning board meeting because it's a lot of time, it's a lot of expense, and for the most part, all that stuff is handled with memorandums. The few times we've brought an engineer in my experience in the past, is when we've had a project that's been going on for a while, and we're down to brass tacks, and we're trying to sort out, make this last push to get the board comfortable enough to make a decision, and we might bring the engineer on that last meeting just to make sure that everything's buttoned up. But there will be no $16,000.
But I really
Jim,
didn't get an
Paul had
answer.
his hand up.
Well, I didn't get an answer to my question. I asked specifically, we're going from 5 inspections to 11. How much more is that's going to cost? And I haven't heard an answer to that
Say he
question.
doesn't know.
I don't know.
Doesn't know. Paul?
Okay, now I understand.
Okay, following up what Charlotte said, as I read through here, I see the planning board's inspector, planning board's engineer. It may be more appropriate to say the planning board's designated inspector, because it may be different for different types of projects, or maybe the engineer too, because the planning board doesn't have an engineer, or doesn't have an inspector. And the second one, I hate to get into this, but I looked at the cost sheet you put together, it's very, very helpful, but most of them say they go out and get a quote. And that's a very time-consuming thing, and I'm wondering if there's a mechanism where we might be able to get, say, 2 or 3 engineering firms that are willing to participate in this program and set up a standard fee arrangement, and perhaps rotate through them or whoever is more qualified for a particular type of development, and just do that in a more timely fashion.
I'll be happy to speak to that. So we put out an RFP. We got about 8 responses. We have 5 people who have made through this level, so we anticipate having a list of 5 engineering firms on the list.
So the planning department will designate the engineer.
Correct. So, well, let me say this, when an application comes in, if an application comes in, and not every engineering firm has its strengths in one spot. Some are better with environmental issues, some are better with transportation sort of issues and things like that. So you would look at the project, what does the project entail? So if we've had a project, and I'm willing to speak from experience where I worked previously. So if we had a project that had a wetland component to it, the first thing I would do is sit down with the wetland, the conservation administrator and say, we have this project, here's our list of consulting engineers, who do you want to use for that? Because I want that same firm to be shepherding the project through the entire process. Make sure they are able to delineate the wetlands and confirm those things for the Conservation Commission. Because if you've got one firm doing something for one board and another firm doing something for another board, then things tend to not work out. You've got battling engineering firms. You may have battling engineers within a firm, but at least with one firm, there's somebody at the firm you can go, can you get your kids on the same page here with what we're reviewing? So in this case, when the project came in, we would look at what it is, where it is, what it composes of, and look at who the best engineer for that project is on the list.
And John had mentioned that some of these inspections he thought could be combined, and I mean, I'm looking at the very end, perhaps 8, final surface, installation of sidewalks and shoulders, and installation of street signs could all be combined, but I
Yeah.
don't know enough about
7
construction.
through 11 could be combined.
Okay.
It
So,
essentially depends on the contractor, how they're
how they're set up.
yeah, what they're on the hook for, what's their contract with the developer.
Is there flexibility to schedule them, to combine them? They may be numbered separately, but can they be done one after another
No, if someone
on the
says,
same day?
if someone sends me a note that the engineer's copied on, it says, we'd like an inspection of our catch basins and our curbing, then, we're fine to put those together. So they're gonna ask us. And at the same time, they know what their work level is. If they know we're gonna get to these 4 things this week, then they might ask for that inspection on a Monday that says, we're gonna be ready for on Wednesday or
So
Thursday
this
for
doesn't
inspection.
delineate instances, it delineates work, a
Yeah, each
particular
one of
type
those
of
things,
work.
yeah, you've got to look at the subgrade, you've got to look at the drain catch basins. It may be at the same time, they may,
And sign off on them separately.
So I saw you had your hand up too, John, is,
Well, I was going to mention that they usually could be combined.
okay.
But I want to talk a lot more about this when we get to that point.
Yeah, so I think we need to continue this discussion. Is that,
I have one more question. What's the impact of timing on having to get all these inspections on a project? Do you think it'll be done in the same time frame as now, or is this going to add 6 or 7 weeks to the project?
I don't believe it's going to add 6 or 7 weeks.
What do you think it's going to add?
I think it's probably going to add a day if necessary on an inspection. Right now, our inspection protocol is you have to call 24 hours in advance before an inspection. Right now, it's 48 hours in advance. So you're going to have to let us know 2 days before you want an inspection, not 1 day before an inspection.
So you're saying we're adding, what is it, 6 inspections, and it's gonna add a day.
I'm going to say when you call for an inspection, you can't get an inspection within 24 hours under this protocol. It will take 48 hours. And if you have 4 things you're going to inspect, it's going to take 1 inspection to get those 4 things done. If you're going to do 11 different inspections, then it's conceivably could take, 22 days to get those 11 inspections done. But there's work that goes in between those things. You just don't magically, things don't magically happen overnight. Obviously it takes time and people to put those things in.
John, did you have anything else?
I want to just have a little better picture of this, because what we have in front of us is for a new road. So Mr. McLaughlin, when he came and spoke to us, I asked him a question. He said that there's about 3 new roads put in the town of Falmouth a year. Now, it could be 5 one year, 1 the next year. So this portion was really not a real big deal. And we had, is it the Cape Club that came in front of us?
Oh.
So when they came in front of us, and they talked about a bond, typically the bond would be for what's left after the base coat of asphalt is down. So at that point, you've got about 75 or 80% of the work already done. It's just the final coat, some sidewalks, and maybe some landscaping. But at that point, before you put your bond up, you're going to have at least 3/4 of the work done. So the bond's going to be a small bond, but if the town were to have to finish that portion of the work. Because no one's going to get a building permit until the road is paved, at least for the base coat. So, but when they came in front of us, the question was the surface below the asphalt, was it adequately compacted? Did it have the right depth? And that was because the town engineer did not have a chance to go there and look at it, didn't have adequate time. And so that was an unusual case. But the applicant, I think it was like $250,000 bond, because they hadn't done the road compaction yet, the nuclear testing. And then he also put up 14 house lots, maybe $200,000 a piece in value. I mean, he put up $3 million of his land, as well as the $250,000 bond. I mean, it's almost absurd, but that's a rare case. I can't see that coming in front of us. But these changes for a subdivision are really not a big deal, except the fact that instead of the town doing the inspections, they want to sub it out to a private contractor. And I could see lots of reasons why it could have a problem. I mean, the engineering department is always staffed. If the guy's putting a road in and like the Cape Club, they need to get an inspection because if it rains, the dense grade is ruined and they have to start all over again or have to wait for it to dry out. And if it's a private engineer and he or she is a single person and not a staff, what if they're on vacation? What if they're ill? What if they're in a hospital and the inspection can't get made for a week or 2? And again, that could be a rare case, but it could happen. Right now, you're calling and we have a whole staff at the Falmouth Engineering that goes out and does the inspection. So I can see lots of concerns. I have concerns about this part of it. But my biggest concern is this is going to carry over into all site plans. And we just recently passed an agreement to have the applicant's engineer give us a stamped plan at the end before they get their occupancy permit that everything's been done the way the site said it's going to be done. So I, for one, would like to table this for a period of time. And because this is going to have far-reaching implications. It really will. It's going to be, and I'm not saying it's bad, it will be bad in the end, but I think it needs to have some time to be studied and for other people in town to take a look at this. And so that's where that's my feelings about it.
Carla?
I'd like to build on what John's saying. I'm just suspicious of privatizing the work. Right now, we have our own engineers going out There's no conflict of interest because they're the town engineers looking after the town's interests. If we privatize it, which is what this really is saying, then we have the developer's person, chosen by them, looking at it, and it's true, their license will be on it, but their whole incentive system is to get more work from that same developer. So they're gonna be more apt to see it from the developer's point of view than from the town's point of view. And I think this chart is interesting. I'm really stunned that Milton has the audacity to charge that amount of money, but it would be more interesting to see which towns do privatize and which don't. I can understand where they don't have any engineers of their own. They're gonna have to. They don't have a choice. But we already have a system. We already have the engineers. The statement wasn't made when this was first presented to us that it was going to free up that engineer's time in order to do some other thing. That the motivation for doing it wasn't clear. And I guess this isn't roads, it's airplanes, but privatizing inspection of airplanes didn't work out for Boeing. So I think it's good to kind of look at this for a little bit.
Then there's another question I would have, though, too. If we didn't want to privatize it, why not ask for more money from the developer so that perhaps our engineering department could put more staff on to handle the requirements?
I think that's an excellent idea.
Tom?
Well, the difficulty of adding staff is the difficulty of adding staff. You know, if you're in a go-go economy, then it's great. You've got lots of projects and things like that coming in, but if you add a person, essentially the engineer to deal with the boom economy, then what do we do when the boom economy fades, as it does? We know it's a cycle, and something's coming at some point. So do we take that person and just say, well, you know, thank you for being here, you got to go, or is it a union person who gets to stay anyhow? So this adds some flexibility. But I can tell you, like I said, I've been at this for 25 years, and it's worked in practice. I've had applicants where I've talked to somebody and says, can you do this project? And they've said, well, no, actually we did some work for this person here, and I feel more comfortable if somebody else did it. I talked about the fact that we did an RFP. We've got about 5 engineering firms that are on the list. As soon as we finish vetting them, the reasons that the other 3 didn't make it was largely because of their experience at doing this sort of thing for towns and their capacity to do so. So the 5 companies that we're looking at are all, there are no single proprietors in the group there. They're all fairly well staffed. But as I said, to use the Boeing example, we do want this to take off, but we're not in any hurry to move it along. So we want a comfort level from the board on this prior to going forward.
Okay. Pam?
Yeah, I look at this sort of in the same way with a real estate transaction, where you have an attorney that works for the bank, and people assume, because there's an attorney, or many people assume, that that attorney that works for the bank is looking out for your best interests. They have a fiduciary responsibility to the bank, and I think, piggybacking on what Charlotte said, there's the same sort of sense to me that you get an outside contractor who wants to get the job done and get paid, but their responsibility isn't to the town of Falmouth. Their responsibility is to whatever firm they're with, or if they're single proprietor, whatever. But to me, it sort of doesn't feel comfortable that we're assigning this or giving this contract to somebody who maybe just cuts off a little bit because they don't work for the town. So I have to have some reassurances that whomever does any work for the town is overseen by the town engineering. And I just don't know how that would work when you have a contract with an outside contractor. So I'd like to continue this and really delve into the bad parts that could happen.
Happy to do that.
Okay.
One last comment, I just want to take a look at what the impact of timing this is going to have on a project. The opinion right now is Falmouth has one of the most difficult towns to get anything to do with, and by looking at the amount of inspections and paper and just not really thinking about it, it looks like we just doubled everything and made it worse. I think so as we study this, if we're gonna do these things, especially if we're gonna be charging them $4,000, is there any way that the process could be sped up and streamlined? Sometimes under construction, you do a controlled construction project, and you have an architect or an engineer, and they sign off, they're there and they sign off on everything, and those projects just move on through. This adds I think it adds a lot of time. I'd like to see the impact on timing, and I think it makes it more difficult.
But Jim, when you compare on this list, construction item, take out the words inspection 1, 2, 3 and all that, but just look at the items under it. The only items that are different on it are the ones about burying the utilities, so that this thing, gas, telephone, electrical cable, doesn't appear on the Form D we've already got. But it,
I'm simply saying,
But it
we
does
have
here.
5 now, we're making it 11.
yeah, we're changing the way we number the inspections and stuff, but you can run them
We're
together.
adding 6 more.
But we're not changing items, except for the buried utilities.
One of the hardest things in a project is to coordinate the inspections. Okay, you have to call, you have to get somebody to come up, and if they can't show that day, or there's a meeting going on and they can't come, all work stops for a week. So every delay that you put in for inspection can add time and time and time. And I'm just a little leery of what we're doing here. I'm not saying that's the case, but on its face, I'm very concerned.
So we
I
need
see
more
what you're
time
saying
to
about the
investigate
time.
it
But,
more.
yeah, but my concern is the timing.
I
Okay,
understand.
that's what I wanted to,
So we would need to have some guarantees that there would not be, and I don't know that we could get guarantees that there would not be a lengthened period. If
Because
somebody
all work
puts in
stops if-
48 hours
if you don't,
before,
if you're waiting for an inspection and you have work that has to go after that, you send everybody home until you get that inspection.
but if you put in for an inspection instead of the 24 hours that they currently do, as Tom indicated, you'd have to put in for an inspection 48 hours before.
All
If you-
depending on weather.
Yes, of course, and that's always the case. But if you put it in 48 hours before, then I think some kind of a guarantee should be offered that that inspection will take place at that point. I don't know if you could.
I think it sounds good.
Uh-huh.
But in
I'll be
practice,
there within 48 hours, but as I said, it depends on who that is subbed out
Right.
to.
Mhm.
When you look at the concept of this, like Jim was talking about, how to make things quicker, what about when you build a house? When you build a building, who does the inspections? Is it the town of Falmouth that does all the inspections? Or does the applicant get to do their own inspections with their own engineer?
with the fox watching the hen house.
Yeah.
I mean, anyway, I don't
resemble
want
that
to
remark.
belabor it, but I just feel, I feel it requires more time to look at it.
That's fine. I
It's
think we're all on
far-reaching. It
board
really
with
is
that.
far-reaching.
I think we're all on board with that. So.
Okay.
We'll see it again.
All righty, well, let's continue this until our November meeting, not November 5th.
Of this year or next?
How about the next?
Just kidding.
I'm just getting my calendar. Hang on a second. So yes, November 26th, 2019.
Okay.
Does that work for the board? So we will continue discussion, subdivision regulations to November 26th, 6:30.
Okay. And I think what I would request, Tom, is that this information, instead of scattered sheets, be put together, because there was no Section 7 in here, or Article 7, whatever it was, so that we have it
It's easier
instead
to
of
find.
scattered sheets all over.
Will do.
Thank
Yeah, we'll
you.
put together sort of a flow chart as well, for you as well. That's
Good.
why I wanted to push it out to November.
Great.
Take that time to kind of put a flow chart together for you as to how that would sort of work.
Thank you. Okay, planning board discussion. First on the agenda is Falmouth Housing, Lewis Neck Road, vote to withdraw.
Sue, do we have planning board policies and procedures prior to that, or is that later on?
That's later on.
Okay.
Okay. Lewis Neck Road, vote to withdraw previous determination of access. And you've got a lot of information here. It's been sent to you also. And Frank Duffy has looked at it. A transcript was done of the meeting, the vote, to clarify what happened. And on the advice of Frank Duffy, he suggested that we move, on the advice of town council, I move to revoke the planning board's vote of June 25th, 2019 regarding Lewis Neck Road. And that was contingent approval based upon certain things, and Frank said, no, that's not a legal approval. So. Tom, I don't know. It's planning board discussion.
It's up to the chair.
Karen would like to speak. Okay, so long as it's,
I just want to say that I found out that this was on the agenda about half an hour ago, kind of because Mr. Ament actually called me and he had seen it on the agenda. So I would like to ask you to postpone any discussion until my legal counsel can be here and until we can be prepared, because I had no idea we were on the agenda. Any discussion was on the agenda.
well, it's okay, but it is still Frank's opinion, and we would be ill-advised, I think, if we ignored his advice.
My attorney thinks that she told me that she doesn't think this board has the authority to revoke it. So I would like to wait on the discussion on that. And is it normal for us not to know that we were on the agenda? Is that normal?
I have
Are we
no idea
informed?
what's normal and what isn't normal in this case, but we were advised by town council because it was not a valid decision. And he looked up case law on this. And
Well, you and I would disagree on that, because our attorney brought up case law that I believe Mr. Duffy said didn't consider at the time. So that's why I would like our attorney here, and she just got back into the country a few hours ago, and she had no idea about this either.
she could look at it.
We'll
We'll
hear
give-
what Mr. Ammon has to say.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah.
Bob?
Thank you, Pat, members of the board. First, I only learned about this on my arrival back from Washington DC at 7:05 this evening. I represent the owner of the property that's affected, Ellen Pildes, as a trustee. That's my interest in this. We have a contract with the Falmouth Housing Trust, and we've relied on the previous decision of the board, which was to make a finding of adequate access, which was what was required by the statement that's on the recorded plan to make the subject lot buildable. I think that tonight we're neither Karen nor I are asking you to ignore town council's advice or not to act accordingly. We're simply asking that you not make a decision on his advice tonight and give Attorney Moynihan and perhaps myself the opportunity to react to an extremely important decision that affects affordable housing, but it also affects my client's property rights, and we think that at least for purposes of affordable housing, there is adequate access. There's access that serves a bunch of houses already existing on the lot, and the road in question has been the subject of approval plans and building permits issued by the building department in past years under the same circumstances. Not asking you to react to those statements or say whether you agree or not, but I would ask you to not vote on revoking an important determination tonight. No notice whatsoever given to the owner of the property. Thank you.
Tom, before we set up a date, I would like to make sure that Frank Duffy can be here as well.
Okay.
Because he's the one who is advising us to do this, that it was not a good decision based upon two problems. And that we therefore should hear it again.
Okay, I can, I'll check with council and see if we want to do this. You have in your packet in attachment number 3, Frank's memorandum. That essentially says in the back of page 2, the planning board voted June 25th was not a valid determination of adequate access to remove the note not a buildable lot from the plan as requested by FHT. At the very least, the planning board should refer to an objective standard about the width and condition of Lewis Neck Road, or had the benefit of the recommendation from the department before it voted on the matter. It voted to defer its final determination to another town agency, resulting in a decision likely to be annulled by a reviewing court. And the standard for this is the planning board cannot delegate your authority to somebody else. As we talked about earlier today, on a private way, what is the standard for that private way? It is what the standard is that the planning board looks at and appreciates as far as, in the opinion of the planning board, sufficient width, suitable grades, adequate construction to provide for the needs of vehicle traffic. And that is in Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 41, Section L, under what the definition of a subdivision is.
Madam Chairman, we're asking just for a continuance, not for a
Understand.
discussion of the merits on this.
Yeah, I understand. So I believe the board can understand why I would like to have Mr. Duffy here, because we're going to have 2 other attorneys here, and I am not an attorney, nor is anybody on the board an attorney.
I think it's a good idea to give them the time, and it's a good idea to have Mr. Duffy here.
So if you can arrange that, thank you, Tom.
I just want to just say one thing. Normally, we put this off because we hadn't heard from the fire department, and I think a lot of us were in a rush to approve this person. I didn't vote for this. I don't think we ever should supersede what the fire department says, and we never have in the past, but for some reason on this event, many members chose to do that. No matter, even though that the fire department hadn't weighed in, they wanted to approve it anyway, and I just don't think we had done that before in the past.
It always comes back to bite us, doesn't it?
It does, it does. Anytime we do that, I think we were trying to help somebody build affordable housing. We didn't look what the fire department said, we didn't have them say, and we didn't look at our own guidelines. We just did what we thought was right.
So we will see you at some point whenever, please work with Tom to put something together, and I don't know when that's going to be.
Yeah, it's fine. As soon as I hear from Frank, I'll shoot you both an email, let you know.
Paul?
I'm a little concerned that the proponents did not know this was on the agenda. This is properly posted,
Yeah,
and it is a planning board discussion.
yeah,
If
I
we're
know.
going to have another discussion, I think it has to be posted as a public hearing, a public discussion.
No,
And
it's,
advertise that.
No, it's not a hearing.
no, it's not a hearing. It was just on here
Well, it
to
was properly
rescind
posted,
our vote.
And we're being told that they didn't know about it until an hour ago.
I'm sorry, but it was posted. So, and it was a planning board discussion.
Yeah.
So we don't normally reach out if it's just a planning board discussion. So, we'll move on, and we'll see you, I don't know, at a date to be determined. Thank you.
Do we normally vote if it's a discussion?
Pardon?
We don't normally vote if it's just a discussion.
We have to have a place to plop it, I think, more than anything.
We need,
You'll see that the next thing in your packet is an open meeting law complaint filed by Mark Finneran regarding the Falmouth Housing Summit on October 2, 2019, saying that it wasn't properly posted. So I need first recognition that you've all been notified that this is in the folder, that there's an open meeting law complaint. And secondly, I would need a vote to authorize the chair and town council to prepare and file an appropriate response. And please use those words, that you move to authorize.
I move to authorize the chair to,
The chair and town council.
and council to give an appropriate response.
No. You gotta read the words.
I think on its face, it's bad. It names me, and I wasn't even there. I just think it's a farce.
So that motion was to authorize the chair and town council to prepare and file an appropriate response?
Correct. And is there a second of that, please?
Second.
Any discussion on it? But
I'd like to make a comment. I think this is properly posted. We've talked about it several times at meetings. The Public Housing Group talked about it. It was in the paper. There were a lot of issues raised about this meeting, and furthermore, it was very well attended, and I thought it was very well done.
Standing
So,
room only.
I'm a little concerned about this accusation here that it was not properly posted. I think it's bogus.
Well, the other interesting thing, I mean, I don't believe any of us spoke at that meeting. I don't think the planning board did, and I don't think our Affordable Housing Committee spoke. So you can't, I mean, to have a complaint like this, it's normally because somebody engaged in a discussion, not because it wasn't posted as a dual meeting. I think in the,
It was a summit. It was not a meeting.
it was a, right, it was a, quote, housing summit, but it was co-sponsored by both of those committees. Maybe in the future, we just should see why our own and just post any meeting, like the Board of Selectmen do when there's a joint meeting.
Oh, yeah, we do too.
So maybe in the future, regardless, even if it's a summit, whatever, that we just post it and just make sure that we're covered. But it was certainly, it had more publicity and more notices all over town than I've seen in a very long time, which is probably why we got so many people.
I'd like to note something. This is unpleasantly personal. If the individual filing this wanted to make a complaint, however founded or not founded, and wanted to indicate that it was going to the planning board, it would probably go to the chair. This isn't. It seems very personal, it's very pointed, and very unpleasant.
Well, it was handed to me by Mike Palmer. He said, "You are the planning board chairman, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah." It was
I'm reacting to
noted to
what's
you,
on the
Jim.
piece of paper.
I know.
I don't think there's any point in discussing this further.
No.
No.
So we need a vote, please. It's been moved and seconded.
So,
All in favor?
All in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Planning board policies.
If I may,
Yes.
Madam Chair. So, way back when I got here, visiting with Pat Kerfoot, she brought to my attention this information package, planning board's policies and procedures that have been put together apparently around 2003 and perhaps updated in 2011. So what you have got before you is that policy, like I said, from 2003, but it says on the top of it, it was going to be voted, but we looked back at the minutes from 2003 and determined it was never voted. So item number one, if these are going to be our policies, we should certainly vote them. And we may not be in a position to vote them all this evening, because one of them deals with 53G, so we know that's at the end. So I'm just going to kind of walk through what those policies were. You know, the only other addition that I had suggested in addition to the 53G was around conceptual meetings. So we'll get to those in just a couple minutes if we can. So the board's procedures from 2003 are essentially this, the only ones that, two new ones are at the end. So the administration of the board will, except for good cause, reorganize within a month after the annual town meeting. B, it has been the past policy that the chairman serves only 3 consecutive years, whereas the term of board members has been reduced to 3 years. The term of the chairman should be reduced to 2 years. You can see this is a bit of a dated document. Chairman votes on all matters when eligible, for or against, or abstains. The staff should be notified of any planned absence by board members. A special permit takes a minimum of 5 members. E, in addition to legally required public notices, an effort should be made to keep the public informed of matters under consideration and of action by the board. The planner and chairman are authorized to answer questions from the press. F, the board will maintain liaison with other departments to ensure that development and growth of the town shall proceed in the best interest of the town. 6, material pertinent to the business of the board is available for reference to members in the board's office. Copies of such materials will be provided upon request. H, to avoid confusion, if staff is given directions, the board shall vote on the instructions and designate the board member who shall work with the staff on any such specific projects. I, any person representing an inquiry of substantive nature shall be advised by members or staff to submit such a matter in writing for the board's consideration. The board shall decide whether to discuss the matter immediately or to have it put on next week's agenda. This sort of predates changes the open meeting law, so we would not be able to immediately discuss that unless it was on the agenda, so we'll have to address item I. J, open task and monthly calendar should be provided to the board on the first Tuesday of every month by the planning staff. And those currently constitute what the board's administrative policies have been.
Excuse me, wasn't there something in these guidelines about policy on widths of
We got,
road?
we got four
Getting there.
sections.
Okay,
Okay, so
Right.
that's Section A, administration of the board. Section 2, conduct of meetings. In the case of inclement weather or lack of a quorum, the chairman will make a decision and contact the planner by 3 p.m. relative to canceling a meeting. B, an effort shall be made to adjourn no later than 10 p.m. A majority vote allows the board to go past 10:30 a.m. Chairman, 10:30 p.m., sorry. I struggle with those numbers sometimes. C, if the chairman and vice chairman are absent, the clerk opens the meeting and calls for nominations for a chairman pro tem. I think this is the Al Haig Amendment. When Al decided he was in charge, if the president and the vice president couldn't be there, not understanding the rules of succession, the clerk doesn't get to take over via Al Haig. He actually has to say, I'm opening the table for nominations for who wants to be the chair and the vice chair for that particular meeting. Section 3, minutes. Members shall receive minutes of the previous meeting at least 2 days before the next meeting, wherever possible. B, if a verbatim statement is requested to be included in the minutes and the board so votes, the written statement shall be presented to the recording secretary. Minutes will include pertinent facts to identify items on the agenda, a condensation of discussion in the board's decision by votes. And C, purely topographical errors which do not obscure the meetings shall not be considered as amendments to the minutes. I think that's supposed to be purely typological errors. We do have topological errors too, but those are usually from surveyors, although they usually do a pretty good job. So 4, regulatory matters. The board will not release individual lots from liability and/or restrictions of a covenant until the work is covered, is completed, or funds are deposited under under a bond or lender's agreement to ensure completion. B, the board will not consider a way that is less than 18 feet wide adequate access for more than one lot. I think that's what you were asking about earlier.
that's what it was.
C, the applicant must have plans in the planning office by 3 p.m. on Thursday before the Tuesday meeting. D, upon first presentation before the board of a definitive, preliminary, site plan, or special permit, the board shall take the plan under advisement. This allows the board to benefit from the advice of its staff and visits to the site. The board may act on a plan upon the first presentation or without first seeing a draft of a decision only by unanimous vote of the board. And I think, as I heard the board say earlier today, when we tend to lunge forward, it sometimes gets served back to us. E, it is the policy of the board to require sidewalks in subdivision of 10 lots or more. F, if an approval not required plan is determined not to be a subdivision, but does not meet zoning regulations, approval of the endorsement, but with a stamp or a note on the plan stating, the planning board's endorsement under subdivision control is not a determination that lots comply with the zoning regulations and should not be construed as an approval that the lots depicted on the plan are entitled to a building permit. That's that motion. You're continually saying, I should have that motion, and I keep saying, I should have that for you. My apologies again. G, public hearings remain open until the following Monday for written comments. And that concludes the board's longstanding policies and procedures. The other two that I am suggesting is the board may, following a department level meeting on the recommendation of the staff, consider conceptual meetings with the proponents prior to an application being filed. Now, we have a lot of people come into the office and say, I got this thing, what do you think about this thing? So we look at it in-house. Sometimes we'll bring it to the development review meeting on a monthly basis and get some input from other folks as well. That to be said, the board, following a department level meeting and on the recommendation of the staff, could have a conceptual meeting. So if we've talked to somebody and we've looked at it and made recommendations to them, and we've reached out into our other departments and things like that, they have a fairly well-crafted idea of what the regulatory body is going to want to see for something like this. And I know the board is very, very cautious about extrajudicial meetings, having a discussion outside of a meeting. But in this case, it is a conceptual meeting prior to an application being filed. So when an application's filed, we don't talk about it publicly until we get to that meeting date, because we're outside of that hearing. So in this case, if someone came to us and said, I got this property down the street, I want to make it into the world's best mini golf, and we talk about mini golf in 4 different departments and get them to a point where we know what the size of the dinosaur is going to be and the size of the windmill and things like that, then they're ready for showtime and come to the board with a conceptual discussion. My history with these has been the board doesn't vote on anything, but the board generally tends to make comments like, you call that a dinosaur? Is that a windmill? I guess windmill's not the best example for family. But in other words, just to sort of glean out some of the concerns of the board. So this is something that we have done, that I've done historically, and it works pretty well. But it's up to the board to decide if they want to do something like that.
Brian did it before, I believe.
Yeah.
There was a lot of that done before it ever came before the board.
But not every application becomes an application.
Right.
Sometimes an application is, well, and I've told people at one point when I worked in Kingston for long enough, I could say what each member of the planning board was going to say in their own tone, in their own accent. But I don't have that benefit anymore to go down the board and say, this is what those people are going to say about your project. So we don't have the benefit of knowing that at this point, but we will at some point in the future. So that was my recommendation for the conceptual meeting. And perhaps you had heard the planner is suggesting that we employ Chapter 44, Section 53G consultants for reviewing of subdivisions, site plans, special permits as well. The 53G process that we've discussed earlier. And this is the requirement that the board may retain the services of a professional consultant as enabled by Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 4453G, to advise the board on technical matters, review plans, and inspect approved developments. The applicant will be responsible for paying all consultant costs incurred under review. Proponents may appeal the use of outside consultants. However, such an appeal shall be limited to claims that the consultant selected has a conflict of interest or does not possess the minimum required qualifications. The minimum qualifications shall consist of either an educational degree or in a related, an educational degree in or related to the field at issue, or 3 or more years of practice in the field at an issue or a related field. The required time limits for action upon the application by a municipal permit granting authority shall be extended by the duration of an administrative appeal. In the event no decision is made by the Board of Selectmen within a month of someone's appeal, that is, following the filing of the appeal, the selection made by the permissible granting authority shall stand. That language is essentially taken out of the statute. So people can complain that the person who's reviewing their project isn't qualified to do the job. They can't qualify. It says they charged me too much, and that is in the statute, I think, largely for that basis. In our 53G list that we're putting together, we're ensuring that all those people who are going to be on the list comport with those basic requirements. So the only option for someone to say, I object to having this particular engineer review my plan is because they have a conflict of interest. But they will certainly all possess the minimum requirements because that's what we've done through the vetting process to identify the firms we would be using.
Well, considering we are going to be looking at 53G in far greater depth, that one, I think, cannot be added, but I think we could even vote to add H tonight because that has been the practice informally without it being part of this. Does anybody have any comments on adding that?
I have some questions about
Sure,
it.
go ahead.
It says the board may, following department-level meetings on the recommendation of its staff, consider conceptual meeting with the proponents. This is adding to the number of meetings of the board?
No.
What's it doing?
No, they'd be on our agenda. So tonight, we'd be talking about the Messrs. Cumberland Farms, and we'd be talking about a conceptual plan for this little mini golf course I think you probably heard about. So it's just another item on the agenda. We're not scheduling a new meeting.
It's just a practice run for the applicants.
Yeah, they would be on the agenda for that evening. Conceptual hearing, planning board, A&Rs.
Ah, okay.
I'm not trying to get you guys out more.
That makes sense to me.
Paul?
Yeah, on that same item I, is this verbiage directly from the statute?
Yes.
Because I'm a little surprised it doesn't say anything about the license
Right.
required. I mean, usually if you have a professional engineer stamping a drawing, you would think a professional engineer would review the drawing and make it appropriate. And secondly, 3 years seems to be a short amount of time to be conducting these kinds of reviews, so I don't know why it's written like that in the statute.
I can't tell you. Lawmakers write these things. Chances are staff wrote this and no one objected to it. It doesn't seem like it's
We're
been.
gonna get into a situation there where people are gonna say he's not qualified because he's not licensed, or she.
John?
Well, as I said, the people who we've vetted, I don't think we're gonna have an unlicensed person on the property based on the 5 firms we're looking.
I
John?
think it's in our interest.
Regarding H, Tom, could you just give us an outline of how it would work? Say there's Cumberland Farm that has come in and applied. So they come in and they do an application. What happens under this H? What happens?
Well, if they do an application, they're having a conceptual meeting.
Okay.
After you file an application, you don't speak to anybody on the board until we have a hearing date.
So it says following department level meetings. What does that mean, please?
So, as I said before, sometimes an applicant will come in and say, I've got this piece of land I want to develop. So we'll talk to them, the staff, sometimes it's me, sometimes it's Corey, sometimes we'll bring Noreen in from the ZBA, and we'll have this conversation with them about what we see as the issues on their plan. So that's that initial staff level meeting. Every month,
The applicant doesn't get an indication that the board would approve or deny as their,
no.
okay.
So that this initial contact is, we sit down, we talk about what their plan is. Sometimes we're able to put things sort of to clear for them, or there's some additional information they want. So we might bring that to this monthly department head meeting, where engineering and conservation and Board of Health, all those folks are there, and bring it to that level. So if we have a discussion at the staff level at my office, and we have a staff level at that monthly meeting at the department level office, then those are those meetings that I would anticipate we'd have. I wouldn't bring somebody off the street to the board, because frankly, the board's time is very valuable. And we want to make sure that, really those projects that have gotten some forethought, I tell people all the time, bring me in your cocktail napkin, I'll take a look at it, we'll talk about it, but I don't want people bringing you a cocktail napkin. By the time they get to you, they want to have the pretty well threshed out ideas and things like that.
No, but having been an applicant in this town and other towns, and this procedure was followed without the conceptual hearing in front of the board, the person that you talk to gives you an indication whether the board will approve it or not approve it. Or they will approve it if you do these changes, and if you don't do these changes, they're not going to accept it. And that could be true, could not be true, but I like the idea of a conceptual plan coming in front of this board, because the applicant doesn't have to spend a fortune to get turned down or to get the idea that it could be approved. I really like this idea.
And in spite of the
Because
comments.
it takes it out of the hands of the staff for the applicant to get a sense of what's going to be okay.
And I believe that if you decided to take your idea to your engineer and develop a plan, and you spent $40,000 on plans, when you come to me and I go, well, that needs to be moved and that's not right, you don't want to do that because you've already invested this money.
Exactly.
So I'm trying to get out in front of folks beforehand, because I am very respectful of people's time and money, in spite of the comments earlier about, why are we charging these folks $4,000? Because this is.
I never questioned the $4,000.
No. But so I want to make sure that we're working with folks early on in the process, before they get invested in those things that makes it difficult for them to decide because of some sort of agreement they made with somebody else or something in their plans.
Sure, thank you.
Do you feel, Paul?
Can I go back to the administrative part of this?
Absolutely.
I see the term of chairman reduced to 2 years, but it's silent on whether the chairman can become chairman again after 2 years. Should that be clarified?
I think that is up to the board.
It's
but-
by vote of the board.
But
And it doesn't say
it's
that here,
silent.
but it's said
So-
at some place, and I
But
don't know where.
this is the time to be plugging these things in, so.
And the other side of it is, how often can you run
So,
for planning board member?
Hang on just
That's in the charter, I don't
Definitely.
know.
No, it's not.
Forever.
So,
What, you want to get rid of me?
Do you want to ask Pat how long she's been on the board and how many times she's been chairman before
That's
you?
what I said. What, you want to get rid of me?
This is appointed.
Well, I'm thinking of Ralph Herbst, actually.
Well, and Pat's even more.
yeah, so right now, the term of the chairman is reduced to 2 years. And there's nothing that says, they're out to pasture after 2 years. So we'd like to include something in that language that says, and may be extended beyond that on
By vote of the
affirmative
board.
vote of the board.
Someplace, it was in there somewhere else, I don't remember.
Well, that's
where.
been the practice anyway, so.
Yeah, but it was actually stated.
As long as it's not restricted, it's understood. You
Mhm.
don't have to say it.
No,
Gotta
you
be
should.
voted.
You should, because then it's policy, that's 2 years and out, as chairman.
2 years, but then you can get voted again.
No, you get voted every year, reorganization every
Yeah.
year after the election. But after you serve 2 consecutive years, then the planning board has to vote. It's in there someplace, in that whole packet of information,
Didn't
someplace.
you just say maybe extended?
Maybe extended
Right.
by vote of the board.
Which we've done.
Yeah, multiple times.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in this case, we would essentially, we don't really need that first paragraph, the first sentence B. In the past, it's been 3 years, the past is the
Right.
past. And now everyone has the terms that they have.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be, the term of the board members, the chairman's term is 2 years and may be extended by a vote of the board.
Yes.
One final comment.
Oh, wait a minute, it's not 2 years once you're elected, because we reorganize every year.
Correct.
Right, how does that work?
So-
If it's voted every year,
It is voted every year.
So
where's the 2 years?
You can have 2 consecutive one-year terms as chairman, unless by vote of the board, it can be extended by election.
Okay.
I'm not thinking right tonight to verbalize it, but
Alrighty, so you'll get a version of that that says this chairman may serve, before we get back to this, the chairman may serve 2 consecutive terms and may be extended beyond by a vote of the board
yeah.
with a
that'll work.
reorganization. And the first thing that it says in your administration, except for with cause, the board will reorganize within a month after annual town meeting, and we do that every year.
Mhm.
So every year right after the elections, that first motion from the board typically is organization of the board.
Well, again, by policy, we did not reorganize unless every member of the board was present. That's not written in here, but we just did it by policy.
These are the policies, so it's not
So
there, it
maybe we
isn't.
should put it in that,
So the person who's missing doesn't become the chairman.
Or maybe they should.
that'll teach you not to show up.
Is that usually the way it is?
What?
They're not here?
There you chairman.
I got one final
Go ahead.
comment. On 3 minutes A, the minutes, says that members shall receive the minutes of previous meetings at least 2 days before the next meeting, whenever possible. And the purpose of it getting is for their review and comment.
Mhm.
I mean, me getting it doesn't help me put final minutes together, so I would like to see something like for their review and comment there. Whether you review or not, at least it's
Concept's there,
implying that
yeah.
you should review it.
So where are you at, Paul? On
I
3A?
just said, wherever possible, for their review and comment.
Oh, so adding to A, wherever possible, add for their
For
review
their
and
review
comment.
and comment. Whenever possible. Depends on depends on when I get them.
I have some sort of memory floating around in the back of my brain that there was some requirement to get the minutes in within 2 days after the meeting occurred.
Yeah, isn't there an open meeting law that
What?
says they have to be posted within a certain amount of time?
Yeah,
It's not 2 days, I think. It's not that
If
short.
someone asks for a copy of the minutes tonight, we can give them a photocopy of what's handwritten.
Right, okay, so
with
that's how you,
draft on it. So we typically tell people, if you want the minutes, you positively have to have them. In fact, the EDIC asked for the minutes from our planning board meeting last week, so we got to them in a draft format. But, you know, in the old days, you could say, well, I have 10 days under the Freedom of Information request. And so, you know, if you didn't want to give someone the minutes, you could certainly make it hard for them to get the minutes. But I like giving people stuff when they ask for it. That way they can move on and get to the things they want to get to. So we,
Okay, so you're not cognizant of some kind of a legal requirement?
you know anything about something like this, Sherry?
something about being filed with the town clerk within a certain amount of
Mhm.
days, but I
That's
don't know
what's
what it
floating around back
That's what
here,
I've heard,
Yeah.
remember that too.
and I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So maybe you need to ask Michael.
Well, I would say that our minutes have been fabulous between the work that
Oh,
Sherry
yeah.
does and working with Paul and getting things done and turned around and getting them posted. I think,
Tom, I'm not questioning that, but
Yeah.
if we're putting it in here in written
Exactly.
form, it should go in.
She misspelled my name last week.
Could I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
On the regulatory matters, Tom, what is the logic in pulling out whatever number this is, 7 items from all of our bylaws to stick them in here?
what is that?
Where, the regulatory matters,
Yes, ma'am.
no, there are more than 8, pulling them out of all the bylaws and listing them here. Why, what makes these special?
What makes, I don't know, you'll have to ask the writer in 2003, but this is how the planning board wants to, will deal with those things. And frankly, we do not release lots until we have a covenant. That's the law.
Right, they're the bylaws, so, and Pat and I have been helping the consultants go through them, and they either are the bylaws or they're not, but putting them here doesn't do anything for them. I don't understand why they get this particular treatment.
Well, I think at some point, it makes it pretty easy for the developer to understand, because the developer is not necessarily going to read Massachusetts general law to the extent that we might. So if we've got a
Not
regulatory matter.
Massachusetts, Not
Our
Massachusetts,
bylaws.
our bylaws,
But
which
but
we
if-
hope they do read.
I would think they would, but having a one-pager that you don't have to go 350 to have 42 on it, that says, you don't get your lots released until we got a bond. I think it's just fairly straight. And like I said, these are your regulations. If you don't want that on there, we can take them off.
John?
Speaking of which, I would like to add in Section 4, regulatory matters.
Hang on, I gotta get it. Yes, sir.
So, Section A, the board will not release individual lots from liability and/or restrictions of a covenant until the work covered is complete. And then I'd like to use the language that we voted on previously, which I think was something like, and a stamped certified as-built plan is given to the planning board.
But that same issue appears in some of the others, where it might not be the same language that's in the bylaw. It's the language in 2003 or some approximation of it.
Well, we adopted this language recently,
We did, but why?
and that's what I would like to insert there, and then continue with, or funds are deposited under a bond or lender's agreement to ensure completion.
You're trying to be sure it's consistent with the bylaw. And I'm saying we shouldn't include these things that are in the bylaw just to avoid problems of consistency. We have the bylaws, they're there, they're all important. These aren't really more important than many of the others. Maybe the only one, because it's procedural, is D.
Well, we also don't have F, that wording.
Well, F is in the current bylaw.
Oh, okay.
So the only, actually, the only things new I added were H and I. So,
Well, yeah, that's what you added new, but I don't think that D is actually a bylaw.
John, from the
Well,
point
these
of
are
view.
guidelines.
Yeah.
I would just like to add that sentence in, as part of the sentence, that, yeah, it's either or, either it's complete and we get a stamped certified as-built plan, or put up a bond.
But from the point of view of somebody who comes before the planning board, does this make it a little easier? Or should they be just removed?
Well, the way it reads now, you either have to be complete, but what is complete?
Yeah,
I'm just trying to,
stamp, like
I'm just
we.
trying to clarify what we've said is complete,
Mhm.
a stamp plan.
Yeah, but mine was more generic, because Charlotte is saying, let's get rid of all of them, because they're covered under our bylaws.
I think we should add D, the policies and procedures, administration of the board, because it's an administrative procedure. And the others are within the bylaws, I believe. And we,
Well,
every
maybe
time you
not.
repeat something, you
No.
slightly change the
I
language.
don't know. I don't think that
create
18-foot
a
wide is
problem.
within the bylaw.
It isn't
See,
18-foot
that-
wide.
Specifically, we chose not to go over these guidelines when we voted that a month ago. And it's because it's not in that the board decided they wanted to
Right.
let that go.
And G is not in there either. The public hearings will remain open until the following Monday for written comments.
So not all
That's
those things are in the
procedural.
bylaws.
Then add the things that are missing to procedural items, and leave the one regulatory matter, and try and get it into the bylaw where it properly belongs.
Well, keep in mind,
This is
there's
just
a
in the wrong
difference between a
place.
bylaw
Bylaw
and the
changes are
policies of
hard.
the board.
Right.
So the policies of the boards are decided by the board.
Yeah.
When the board advertises it, they're gonna talk about them, so that's where we're at right now. If you wanna put something in the bylaw, that has to go to town meeting, and 2/3 of the folks who vote on it have to decide this is important to the board. So these are the board's regulations for how they're going to administer their meetings. The things that are in the bylaw are clearly in the bylaw, but those things that the board is gonna take up in the course of their meetings, that's what the nature of this is. It's,
Do you think it would be a good idea to remove those matters under regulatory matters that are in the bylaws from these statements?
if we were to do that, I think we'd basically be taking out A.
What about E?
I've never seen that. I looked in our subdivision regs, I didn't see that. 'Cause
It's
I
the
didn't know that.
policy of the board.
Yeah, and we once had a big discussion on sidewalks, and we almost waived them on a subdivision until we really discussed it more, and then we said, well, maybe we shouldn't do that.
I think I'd leave all these in.
I do too.
Okay.
And, it's what we do as a board. If you don't, if you put it into bylaw, it's a big deal. It's 2/3 vote. It's a big change. We should have some things that are ours to decide on.
These are your policies and procedures.
Yep.
Right. Okay, so we have a few changes to be made, brought up tonight. And we have H, the board may, following the department level meetings, on the recommendation of its staff, consider conceptual meeting with the proponents prior to an application being filed. And we seem to think that this makes a lot of sense, that before they go to the expense of filing fees and
Right.
all of that, that would be a good idea to come before the board and
I think
say,
it's terrific.
yeah, conceptually, what do you think? I like it.
I like it a lot.
I think it's especially good with our new guidelines.
Yeah,
And don't anticipate that you're gonna see folks in here on a pretty regular
No,
basis, because
I
for the
don't
most
either.
part, we deal with them at that staff level. We've had, probably in my 20 years in Kingston, 3 or 4
Mhm.
conceptual plans that came to the board, if that.
so is everybody wanting to get that put in?
Right, but we're dropping
H.
I.
Yeah, we're not considering I until we have the 53G decision, one way or the other.
Mhm.
You can keep the language around, Tom, but drop it out.
I'll have it in a safe spot for you.
Okay.
Can I just, this is driving me crazy, that B, under administration,
Administration of Board, item number B.
yeah, it has been past policy. I don't really think we need that. I don't think we need,
So that's coming out.
Yeah. So what it's gonna
No.
say, what it's gonna say in its next version is the chairman may serve, up to 2 consecutive years. It may be extended by a vote of the board.
well, I think you need a first sentence that planning board members are elected for a 3-year term, period,
Okay,
and then yours, because otherwise, there's no context to it.
okay, that's fine. Thank you. Now I know why it was
Well, it's just so,
awkward. Okay. Can we move on? Okay. We're going on now to form-based code funding. And Jim has a presentation to give. And
Is it 5 minutes or less?
It's 9 minutes and 29 seconds.
If,
I'm okay if you don't want to do it
if
till
it's
late
the
night.
policy of the board to, is it in the charter that we wrote into organization every year? I think it is.
Yeah, it
The
is.
charter, I think, yeah, never mind.
Okay, so we can do that presentation. The reason for the presentation is that it should be done before town meeting because, and get your approval. And tonight is the best time to do it probably, because to send it out to all town meeting members so that they understand what the non-capital
That's fine, I was just
budget.
wondering how long.
I've been preparing all week if you want to just waste all my time and have me sit down and
Never,
find.
I would never do that. No.
You going to cue it up?
But that is the reason for it, and I do not know the number under the non-capital budget. I've not seen the budget, so I couldn't tell anybody.
When's town meeting, the 12th?
The 12th of November. So we're doing our homework on this, because in essence, what we're asking for,
We're
That was
taking
my
the
chicken.
debate, are you?
what the planning board is asking for is almost, I think you'd call it the third tranche on this, because we had a charrette where the Cape Cod Commission came in. There were a lot of people here from the town who said, this is what we want to see our town look like in the redevelopment areas. And then they came back with, okay, this is what was chosen. And so we got pictorial. Then we came back for the next time with what Jim is about to show
Don't forget
on
about the survey.
form-based code. That was the survey that I was talking about.
That went out all over town.
Yeah, right. And then now we're asking for more funding to get more detail in that area. Again, with the people who know what they're doing, engineering, and so we get some more definition of what we can do there. So Jim is showing the result of the second effort, and we're asking for a third effort now.
Okay, so what I did was with Pat's approval, I changed the name a little bit. We kept talking form-based code. If you go online and you look for form-based code, there's 200 different form-based code stories. But if you look for density done right, it comes up number one on Google. So all you have to do on your home phone, if you're a television controller at home, if you have the one that does the voice command, say YouTube, density done right, and it brings you right to this page, and our report's right there on top. So it's now a YouTube presentation, so town meeting members or anyone can see it. And you don't have to listen to me, it's narrated.
Form-based code, density done right. The planning board is exploring the use
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh, what
of our
happened?
town, while at the same time protecting the environment, resilience, and the character of our community. Community goals and public policies from the local comprehensive plan. Policy number 1. Falmouth shall continuously analyze the zoning rules that guide development to ensure that they are flexible, fair, and innovative to improve the quality of the public streetscape. Policy number 2. Falmouth shall development into convenient and pleasant villages suitable for the 21st century, balanced with large reserves of open land. Policy number 3. Falmouth shall encourage a high-quality and durable built environment that respects the culture of the community. Policy number 4. Falmouth shall provide for a comprehensive network of access corridors to accommodate many modes of travel. Policy number 5. Falmouth shall encourage increased density primarily through redevelopment in some areas and discouraging further development in others. Falmouth first adopted Euclidean zoning in 1925, being one of the first towns in the Commonwealth to do so, named after a famous Supreme Court case, Town of Euclid v. Ambler Realty. Basis of use zoning was to separate noxious use from residential settings. Issues with current zoning. The segregation of uses has also led to isolated zones for commercial, residential, and institutional areas, which are only linked by auto and thus failing to create walkable, pedestrian-friendly neighborhoods. While conventional zoning closely regulates a variety of aspects related to use, parking, buffers, etc., it does not regulate the aspects that help enhancing the character of buildings, streets, and open spaces, which together form a neighborhood. Comparing zoning types. Conventional zoning specifies density use, floor area ratios, setbacks, parking requirements, and maximum building heights. Zoning design guidelines utilize conventional zoning requirements, and they specify frequency of openings and surface articulation. Form-based code dictates street and building types, or mix of types, build-to lines, number of floors, and percentage of built site frontage. What is form-based code? A form-based code is a land development regulation that fosters predictable built results and a high-quality public realm by using physical form, rather than separation of uses, as the organizing principle for the code. A form-based code replaces all or part of the zoning ordinance of a city or town. A form-based code is a regulation, not a mere guideline, adopted into a city or town zoning bylaw. A form-based code can offer a powerful alternative to conventional zoning regulation. What does form-based code do? Instead of concentrating on land uses, meaning the use of the building primarily, plus any outdoor commercial use, this new type of code is a legal design regulation that describes the desirable physical form, placement, size, and bulk of buildings within the environment. It also addresses the size of blocks and their relationships to one another. The regulations and standards in form-based codes are presented in both words and clearly drawn diagrams and other visuals. They are keyed to a regulating plan that designates the appropriate form and scale, and therefore character, of development, rather than only distinctions in land use types. This approach contrasts with conventional zoning's focus on the micromanagement and segregation of land uses, and the control of development intensity through abstract and uncoordinated parameters. For example, floor area ratios, dwellings per acre, setbacks, parking ratios, and traffic, to the neglect of an integrated built form. Form-based codes are regulatory, not advisory. They are drafted to implement a community plan. Ultimately, a form-based code is a tool. The quality of development outcomes depends on the quality and objectives of the community plan that the code implements. Main elements of form-based code. 1. Regulating plan. A plan or map of the regulated area designating the locations where different building form standards apply. 2. Public standards. Specifies elements in the public realm: sidewalk, travel lanes, on-street parking, street trees and furniture, etc. 3. Building standards. Regulations controlling features, configurations, and functions of buildings that define and shape the public realm. 4. Administration, a clearly defined and streamlined application and project review process. 5. Definitions, a glossary to ensure precise use of technical terms. Optional code elements, architectural standards, regulations controlling external architectural materials, quality, and appropriateness. Landscaping standards, regulations controlling landscape design and plant materials on private property as they impact public spaces. Signage standards, regulations controlling allowable signage sizes, materials, illumination, and placement. Environment resource standards, regulations controlling issues such as stormwater drainage and infiltration, development on slopes, tree protections, solar access, etc. Annotation, text illustrations explaining the intentions of specific code provisions. The form of our towns and cities affects the quality of our lives. The facades of buildings should welcome people, not repel them. Buildings should contribute to the public realm, not hide from it. Great streets happen when road and building designs are matched. Small towns can be revitalized by building on their original form. How we regulate urban form shapes the life of communities. Our existing zoning is flawed. Using the Staples Plaza as an example, we have applied the current zoning regulations to show density at 6 units per acre, resulting in 2,000 square foot or 4,000 square foot units. The Davis Straits redevelopment is proposing 20 units per acre. This slide shows the existing condition with illustrated case study for form-based code outlined in red dotted lines, noting Staples is the building with a white roof and blue pin in the middle. In the top left-hand corner, you will see an example of the proposed regulating plan utilizing form-based code. Current zoning for B2. Max density, 6 dwelling units per acre, shown as 20 dwelling units per acre. Max height, 2.5 stories, shown at 2 to 3 stories, shown with reduced setbacks for multifamily, including mixed walk-up use, walk-ups, manor homes, double-deckers, townhouses, and duplexes, totaling 4,500 square feet of retail, 52 units, and 20 dwelling units per acre. This is a rendering of what form-based code could look like. This is the anticipated timeline for the work on this project. This will go in front of town meetings, public hearings will be held, and eventually it could be adopted into the zoning bylaw, hopefully by November town meeting 2020.
That's it. This is designed to take under 10 minutes if we has to go to town meeting. And this is just the footnotes of the places we've got. I
Thank
didn't
you.
write this, I copied it from all these websites. And that's it. That's all it is.
So what we would be looking for tonight is to send out to all the town meeting members the linkages to this presentation and the reason why we are sending it out to them, that we would hope for their total support on that. And Tom has to look up what it is in that non-capital budget.
In Article 3.
Yeah, in Article 3, but,
So moved.
so,
I just want to point out for people at home, if you have the voice control on your Xfinity and you push the speaker button and you say YouTube, density by design, takes you right to this presentation.
density done right.
Density done right, excuse me. Density done right, sorry. Density done right. And it just, so it's immediately available. We don't even have to send it out. It's out there on YouTube already. So all we have to do is send them the link, or they can go to the computer and search it themselves. But it's out there, like, we watched this online tonight. I didn't bring it on a thumb drive or anything. I went out to the internet and showed it to you. Anyone can do it at home now, too.
And so
That's it.
the point of this is to get their support for that funding for $49,900 to continue the effort in this design.
Made and seconded.
Was there a second?
Yep.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Is the intent to
And
show this?
the real work on this time was done by my daughter Jessica. If you noticed, she had to talk really fast to keep it under 10 minutes.
Well, then, thank you, Jessica.
Yes, she worked hard on it. Every time you make a change, you have to start from the beginning and go
Yeah.
all the way through. It's not an easy thing to do.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Are there any committee reports tonight?
Not in your life.
Nope.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Coastal Resiliency Action Committee had a meeting today, a working group meeting in this room on the Surf Drive project. So that's moving forward as a timeline developed and a draft report out. So they're planning a workshop sometime next month? Later this month, I think it is. Early November, sorry.
Okay, before town meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we have a joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen, and
Monday.
there, on Monday, the 21st, and there will
At-
be, I don't know yet. We
Oh.
haven't gotten any of that further information. They were going to be working on putting an agenda together, but the two topics are, first is transportation, and of course, that covers a multitude of topics that are critical to the town. And hopefully, we'll be able to get some policies and some actions going before next summer that might help. And the second on the agenda is housing. And of course, that is a huge topic. And I'm not sure where it's going to lead. The selectmen are going to have a meeting early in the year on affordable housing, a large meeting. So they wanted to have that second on the agenda, and in particular also because transportation has just been the orphan. We haven't discussed that at all for quite a while. So look this week for an agenda of some sort for Monday, the 21st. They usually, I think their meetings usually start at 6:30 like ours do. But I don't know if it's going to start at 6:30 or 6. I don't know.
So if I can expand a little on that.
Yes, please.
So we put together our list very detailed about, 5 different components of housing, 5 different components of transportation. And the discussion with the Board of Selectmen is, well, let's do them both. Let's not segment them to this sort of fine grain, identifying each of these points. And let's sort of let the conversation evolve at the table. So they want to start with transportation and then talk about housing as well. So what I'll be putting together for them are the things that are in the LCP regarding housing and transportation, as well as those things in our housing plan or in our plans, our transportation plans that we have, executive summaries, things like that. You can't quite get to all of those sort of things. And so I have some basis, knowledge base for both boards, for you guys and for the Board of Selectmen as well. We're talking about having potentially a speaker come by and talk about 40R on the housing side of things. There are a number of things that are in the comprehensive plan, both for housing and transportation. So we just want to make sure that we're clear on what those are, so we're kind of moving the ball along, and we're not just making things up out of whole cloth.
Thank you.
The only thing on the 40R, I want to make sure that they address that issue of how, when I read it on one section, it does limit it to 50% have to be 3 bedrooms. It says it in the section I have, and you say that's not the case. I would like to be shown why that. I mean,
It's not.
I don't know, I just looked it up and saw it. I have no idea, but I found a piece of paper that says it needs 50% to be 3 bedrooms. And that won't work for Davis Straits.
Yeah, it won't.
There's an interesting update that's online, and apparently the people who conceived of it and passed it in the legislature are some ticked off that most of the things built under 40R are 1 and 2 bedroom. Said in that fine update.
Are there any announcements tonight? Okay. General correspondence, and you have all of that in your folder, so I don't know that there's anything that I need to go over here. The home modification loan program, that's in there. The, CPTC, whatever it is. Yeah, I did it. CPTC, Citizen Planner Training Collaborative, their workshops for the fall. That's listed in there. But most critical, I think, in here, John Drewley put a lot of time into putting this concept together, Falmouth Affordable Dwelling Bylaw. And I really would ask all of you to study it and come up with your comments on it. And I think it should be a discussion topic for a future meeting of ours, so that we can start working towards something on this. And John, thank you very much for putting
Welcome, it's a
this
start.
about. It's a start, and it's wonderful that we have something like this to bounce off of.
Thank you.
I said I would love it if John would come to our Affordable Housing Committee and go over some of these things and get everyone's blood roiling over how difficult it is to get any sizable affordable housing.
I just would like to get some other input, and I want to make sure that some of these items here are correct. I'm still doing a little bit of research on some of the items here, so.
Okay, because
I
Charlotte
don't
and
want to
went over
mislead
it.
everyone, so.
No, Charlotte and I went over it. We've got questions when I was meeting with her, since she'll be chairing the next meeting and the one following.
Yeah,
I
think
didn't want to
it's
leave her dangling.
a terrific thing, and I want to ask you, Pat, do you want us to wait until you get back to have that discussion?
Oh, yes, if
Yeah,
we
so-
could.
So, John, if you don't mind, we'll just wait until Pat gets back.
Sure.
Yeah, because there's so much in that and it's critical.
Well, and John said he's still got more research to do on it.
Right, and I know Jim has done a lot of thinking about it, and I'm sure everyone who got it has.
So, at a meeting after I get back, then we'll take that up and really give some real serious, it's not gonna be just a one-night affair either. We're gonna be doing a lot of work on that, I anticipate. Okay, so our next meeting is the joint meeting. Do you want me to bring up future agenda items, or you think we're piled up with them? I think we are.
We're
but-
piled.
Yeah, okay. Our next meeting is October 21st, and that's the joint meeting with the Board of Selectmen, time to be determined. Okay. And as Tom pointed out, the topics came from comments generated by this board and taken note of, so. And then October 22nd
No, yeah,
is the planning board meeting, so there's gonna be back-to-back meetings, one night after another. A lot of caffeine, folks. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
If I may,
What?
just two
Oh,
other things in our
Tom?
correspondence. One is that the Falmouth Housing Trust is having their annual meeting on October 24th.
Oh, I missed that.
Please feel free to RSVP. I did. And also.
Is that the one with the Woods Hole Golf Club?
Yeah,
Oh,
Good take.
Very good, worthwhile going.
yes.
really? That sounds nice.
you have the League of Women Voters, Coastal Resilience, meeting October 24th, 7 to 8:30 at the Herman Room.
Same time.
Yeah, there are a lot of things that are doubling up.
What's that one?
This is League of Women Voters, Coastal Resilience. The meeting is Thursday, October 24th, 7 to 8:30 in the Herman Room of Falmouth Public Library. The Natural Resources Committee of the League of Women Voters of Falmouth will host a public presentation on coastal resilience. Charles McCaffrey of the Falmouth Coastal Resilience Action Committee will present that group's work on several funded research studies, including the Surf Drive Vulnerability Assessment. The goal of the study is to predict where coastal flooding will come and what infrastructure is at greatest risk, so that various ways of reducing flooding damage may be considered. Aaron Perry of the Cape Cod Commission will present Resilient Cape Cod, an online, an online tool the commission has developed in partnership with several other groups, so that individuals may explore the potential impact of sea level rise at many points around the Cape, and efforts underway to protect these areas in the short and long term. So they're inviting everybody.
What was the other meeting that same night?
Falmouth Housing
Uh-huh.
Trust.
At the
I
Woods
thought
Hole
there was
Golf
a-
Club.
I thought there was a third one.
Well, I'm going to the CPC meeting to talk about Shivericks Pond myself, but it's a building with lots of meetings in it.
A lot of meetings that
That's
night.
the
huh?
Falmouth Housing Trust at the Woods Hole Golf Club. That
you're
was
going
the
to
other
the
one.
Shivericks?
Just those two meetings?
Yep.
Going to the Shivericks?
So the only other thing that I wanted to make mention of, if I may, Madam Chair, also in your package is this letter from the Economic Development Assistance Corporation. And this is a home modification loan program. It's a state-funded program. They say that it typically benefits elders and folks with disabilities, perhaps. It says 2000, the Housing Modification Loan Program has made loans that helped over 3,000 Massachusetts households finance projects like accessory units, home security feature, fencing, ramps, wheelchairs, and chair lifts, widening doors, bathrooms and kitchen modifications, and more. The Home Modification Loan Program offers loans up to $50,000 depending upon the household income. All loans are offered at no accrued interest and require no monthly payment, with the repayment of the loan only when the property is sold or when the title has changed hands. So this is a program that's been around for a while. We've got some mail about it. We're gonna hang up some information sheets in the bulletin board down here. But essentially, we did something similar to this a few years back through a different program where you can get a loan, make improvements to your home, and then when the house is sold, those are paid off, so you don't have to have that out of pocket.
They're not amortized?
In the case of the one that we did for the CDBG funds, you had to live in the house for 7 years. You lived in the house for 7 years, it went away. In the case of these, all loans offered by the Housing Modification Loan Program accrue with no interest and require no monthly payments.
Wow.
With the repayment of a loan required only when the property is sold or when the property's title or changed hands. HTP, HMLP, this program offers loans up to $30,000 to owners of manufactured or mobile homes. Landlords with identified tenants needing accessible adaptions and who have buildings with fewer than 10 units can qualify for a 3% loan. So if you're a tenant, if you're a property owner, or you're a tenant, there could be something in it for you.
I think I heard you say that they could do an accessory apartment, borrow up to $50,000 and not pay it back till they sell the property? Is that what I heard?
Since 2000, the Home Modification Loan Program has made loans that have helped over 3,000 Massachusetts households finance project-like accessory units, home security features, fencing, ramps, wheelchairs, and lifts, widening doors, bathrooms, and kitchen modifications, and more.
And you don't pay it back,
Until you sell
no
the house.
monthly payments, but when the house is sold is when the money goes back. Should encourage some accessory apartments.
I would do it.
How is that
The
going to be
information.
marketed? How will people learn about that?
I just read it on TV.
Yeah, and the information
more
is in the
marketing.
planning office.
Yeah, we've got this flyer that they put together for us, so we'll have some of those on the bulletin board there. But we can certainly find some place to.
The Enterprise lady left.
I know.
Too bad. Maybe you could mail it to her.
Well, you could put several units in your home.
You're only allowed
Thanks,
one.
Pam, for that idea.
Only one affordable unit per house.
One accessory unit.
Well, why don't we get that to the Enterprise? That's a very important,
There may be some income guidelines that go along
Right.
with
I
this.
think there are.
And there may be
Sounded
some
like-
deed restrictions, I'm not
Right.
sure about that. but-
there probably is, because it sounds too good to be true.
And
it
if
might
it
fit a
sounds
lot
too
of
good to
people.
be true,
Well, to be fair to the public, I mean,
Yeah.
if there are income guidelines, it should be noted.
I was truncated on that. We are adjourned.
Okay.
We're missing the